Hey everybody, it's Lee, and this is Heavy Art Talk episode 4. I am absolutely honored to have Brad Moore here with me. How's your week been, Brad?
It's been great so far, Lee.
All right, well, really appreciate you carving out some time. So, for everybody, I'm sure you've seen some of Brad Moore's artwork before. I'm going to give just a quick little bio, or rather, just kind of an about, and talk about some of his credits in terms of album artworks and other merch that he's done for his band. So, a little bit about Brad. He's an artist that really can't be labeled, and he doesn't really belong to any one genre or category. He's a painter, an illustrator, video artist, and comic creator, and he's best known for doing at least 24 CD and album covers for death metal bands and other metal bands. He's worked alongside a lot of legendary artists such as Steve Bissette, Tim Vigil, Everette Hartsoe, and he does a ton of city murals, which is very cool, comic art, and he's done things for Cadaver, Necrotica, and Bathory, the Countess of Blood. And he currently works at his studio in Illinois.
Yeah, although today we're actually beaming from St. Louis. The internet at my building, the building was hit by lightning, and there's been some storms and things. So this is not my studio; it's my girlfriend's studio.
Oh, nice. I appreciate you making the trip. And I'm just going to list out a couple of the bands that he's worked with. Gatecreeper. I'm actually wearing your shirt here for Deserted. Yeah, got a rep, whenever I got the guess. Tomb Mold, Worm, Morpheus Descends, Sedimentum, Argus, Flesh Rot, Organic Infest, Meat Shits, Crotch Ripper, Mortuous, Cornucopia of Death, Ed Mundell of Monster Magnet, Morbid Savoring, Spinebreaker, Pale Divine, and Putrid Tomb.
Yeah.
So it's a long list. You've been in the industry for a while.
In fact, I was counting how many, and I'm up to 34 covers now.
That's amazing. Do you feel like a lot of those have been fairly recent, or do you think they're like kind of spread evenly across your career?
Spread out, because a lot of times I would leave the music industry and then go and work in comic books for a while. And then, like you mentioned, the city murals, that was a big project that took up a lot of time for a few years. And when the funding fell out of that, and I thought, well, I'll go back into illustration. And that's what I did, and went back into it full time. And I've done some things that metal people and comic book people wouldn't even recognize, but you have to pay the bills. If you're going to be a working artist, you got to accept some jobs that aren't going to be fandom oriented, that people are going to look at and go, you did that? It's like, well, yes, because I have to eat and sleep indoors.
Oh, totally. Where are some of those murals?
In the city of Carbondale, where my studio is, and employed some student people, like some kids that have been in trouble with the law and things like that. And they had a chance to redeem themselves a little bit by taking art or music courses, and that helps them a great deal. I believe in causes like that. And so, although it was difficult and rough, and I had some crazy crews at times, we managed to make some pretty good things. And it was my concept of a thing I called the mobile mural, in that they were on large sheets of metal and we could put them together. It wasn't one big 18-foot painting. Everybody had a 9-foot piece, and we put it together. Well, excuse me, a 6-foot piece, and we put them together. And that was mobile. So if somebody said, well, we're going to tear down this building, or we're going to move this wall, or we want to repaint, you could just unbolt it and move it to a new location and not lose the mural. And they weren't pictures of anything. They were quite abstract, but they were very, very tight and detailed, because it was based on the mathematical works of Roger Penrose. And his idea was that he came up with two shapes. This is mind-boggling. Two shapes that, if you flip them and turn them or whatever, fill any space, round or pointed. And when you see it, it just blows your mind. The man's name was Roger Penrose, and he came up with these things. And when you look at it, it's just called the Penrose tilings is the basic name it goes by. I looked at that and I was amazed by that, but that was a little too over the heads of the people I would be working with. So instead, I changed it to breaking things up into squares on these 6-foot pieces of metal. Aluminum is what they were. And breaking it up, and then you draw a small model of it, with every square being 3 inches, and take a slip of paper and make a series of dots. You make this up, and you make 3 dots, and then put it on a slip of paper and move those 3 dots around the around the square like a bus going around the block. And then you connect it and see what kind of pattern you get. When you get a pattern you like, you repeat that in each one of these blocks over and over again till you had 2 rows. Then it was easy to repeat that into 2 more rows and fulfill the 6-foot area. And then these were interlocking. One would fit with another, would fit with another, would fit with another. And that made them the concept of it being mobile. And so this was all my doing. I came up with this inspired by Roger Penrose. And so the city of Carbondale didn't know what they were looking for when they hired me, because they said, well, it can't be skeletons and eyeballs and naked women and all the things I'm known for. It couldn't be that. I said, of course it can't be that. Here's what I proposed. I did this whole presentation in front of the mayor and all this stuff, and we got funding just quickly. It happened right away. And I did that for a number of years, I think about 5 years straight. And so I wasn't doing metal art. I did do a little bit of freelance work and a few commissions, but I wasn't doing the stuff like I'm doing now. But like I said, the bottom fell out of this, as it always will. Politics takes over and ruins things, and the budgets kept getting smaller and smaller, and we're going to do less and less. And then there's the only part of it that's still up is in our local train station. The rest of it has all been taken down. And I said, well, where are those works of art? We can do something with them. No one answers me. No one knows. And so I washed my hands of the whole thing. So, but I'm not bitter about it. We did that. We were successful. It got huge coverage, and the rest is history. And I've made my living doing that for several years. But that's just one of the many things. Before that and after that was comic books, and like as you know. So
yeah, you've had to keep pivoting and basically take projects where they come.
You have to go where the gig is. Yeah, you have to go where the gig is, and that's majorly important. Something I try to get across to young artists, because a lot of people come up to me and ask all the time, boy, I want to do what you're doing. How do you do that? And I said, well, there's a lot to know. It's not just sitting back and people just shower you with accolades and you're just making the big money right off the bat and all that. No, you start off low. It's like I always tell them, if you go to work for at a bank, they don't make you the bank president right off the bat. You start off emptying waste baskets and sweeping the floor. Well, the same is true for art. You're not going to get the multi-$1,000 paychecks right off the bat unless your dad owns the publishing company. So it's time to be realistic about these things. A lot of times you'll have to have a part-time job when you first start out. And when I first started out, I was a cameraman at a TV station. And we did the weather and comedy and local commercials, and that paid the bills enough that I could do art on the side, and all of it together made the beginning of my living, and then but it's always been art. It always has been. I haven't done another job at all except art, not counting when I was in art school. I waited tables like a lot of people do. Other than that, I've made a living entirely on art. I was told my whole life that you'll be on unemployment 50% of the time, and I have never been on unemployment.
Cheers to that. Yeah, it sounds like you learned a lot of the ethical principles and the having to have really hard work and working for the gigs. It seems like some of those lessons come more from people that did start illustrating and stuff kind of like in the 80s and 90s. So I think that's really cool. For instance, I had that question, just what are some of the lessons you learned from Herb Fink? Do you think some of those might be related to how you progressed in your career?
Very much so. I owe a lot to him. If anybody doesn't know, Herb Fink was a teacher at the college I was at, which was Southern Illinois University in Illinois, SIU. Go Salukis. And, he was instrumental. Him and another man named Ed Shea. And I would say both these men, and this is why I tell people endlessly, get a good teacher if you can, get a good one, because they took me from where I was and eliminated 10 years of making mistakes, of trial and error, which would mostly be error. And they eliminated that, got me through that. Don't do this, don't do that. And many times I balked. Many times I thought that no, they don't know, they're not sure, because, as a young man, you're going to butt heads. And, no, they eliminated a lot of that. So when I graduated college, art school, I was ready to get commissions. And in fact, my first commission happened before I graduated, and it was designing a booklet for a Star Trek convention.
Sounds awesome.
And it wasn't a big paycheck, $200, but they said, I was looking at your resume and you said that you're an oil painter, and I paint in acrylic now, but in those days I was trained in oil. And I said, yes. And they said, well, send me one sample. And he looked at it and he goes, I like what I see. If you can get yourself to Chicago when the tour gets to Chicago, the convention tour, I'll put you on the walls with the big guys. Those were his words. I didn't even question that. We took a train, got up there, and did it. I went with a friend of mine. And the big guys, they put me on the walls, and the one on one side was Richard Corbin. You know who that is, right?
The name sounds familiar, but
from Heavy Metal Magazine and all that.
Oh yes,
The guy on the other side. The guy on the other side was the man who designed all the Star Wars movies. And it was just like, you got to be kidding. And I was surprised. I thought he would be this guy in his late 20s, early 30s. He was old. He was really old. I saw him and hardly spoke with him. He was just, you know, I'm not making fun of him. I was just shocked that, oh, this guy.
Yeah.
Star Wars. Wow. That's it. But, and that was my first exposure. I had to make business cards on pieces of paper. I couldn't afford to go to somebody and have them printed out and cut them out, you know. And it's just handwritten, or we'll handwrite one of them and Xerox it, you know, and cut it out over and over again. And I handed those out, and I got work from that first show. I got publishing work. I don't think you could do that. I don't think you could do that today. Quite, you know, it's a little slicker today, but back then it completely worked.
When you're talking about those 10 years of being able to kind of curb those mistakes that you may have had if you didn't have those mentors, were more of those business kind of related and like how to be a working artist, or were there more artistic lessons on how to refine your craft?
It was quite evenly on both. And I really credit them that, because I've talked to a lot of people who went to art school and said they never discussed how to fulfill a contract, how to approach the art director, you know, and that's not my case. In fact, Ed Shea, my painting instructor, told me he was rough. He was really rough. Everybody hoped that they didn't get this professor. And he said, although several people left the class in tears, and I'm not playing. And he said, if you don't like me now, you won't like working with an art director or a museum director or a gallery owner. You won't. So I've got you for, you know, X amount of time. And while I've got you, I've got to show you what it's going to be like in that little bit of time. And there were people, in tears at sometimes. He was rough, but I learned when it ended, and I was thinking, oh, I hate this guy. But when it ended, I had huge admiration for him when I saw how far he took me in one semester, let alone 3. And I was stunned at how far he took me, because I went in there thinking I'm already pretty good. I didn't know dick compared to what he showed me. I mean, we're talking everything. A lot of people say, what can you learn is just taking a paintbrush and doing this. Of course, they don't know that it's a whole universe of application. So the business area was another thing too, because Herb Fink showed me how to put together a portfolio, and whether you're doing it digitally or you're making a physical one to mail out, the essence is the same. And I said, he goes, bring in 10 of your best pieces, never more than 10. And it should be less than that. He goes, bring in 10. So I brought him in, and he started eliminating 2 or 3. Some that were my favorites. He goes, this won't work. This will work against you. And I was thinking, oh, I don't think he's right. But I did what he said, and boom, I got work. It worked. And he showed me how to write the cover letter. Nowadays, I don't even have to turn in a resume or a cover letter. I've gotten known. You know, if they say, Brad, well, your name is familiar, who I say, the guy who did Worm or the guy who did the Countess Bathory, and then immediately they know. You know, I'm not going to say it opens every door, but I don't have to, you know, to type up a 300-page resume anymore. So I've been published worldwide well over 600 times, and there's no way that resume is like a miniature phone book, you know. So I wouldn't want to do that now, and I'm glad that I don't have to do that now. But young people starting out might have 5 to 20 entries on a resume, and you need to still do that if you haven't built a reputation.
Yeah. Do you think that he cut out the work that just basically art directors wouldn't like, that's for commercial work? Like, it wasn't even if it was good, it's just like, is it the right thing to put in the portfolio?
What he showed me is, don't show them the stuff that you do. Like, you have to ascertain what the art director that you want to work for, a company like Heavy Metal Magazine or just whatever it is, what are they going to look for? And you say, well, here's my stuff here's what the art student thinks. Here's my stuff that everybody is going to look at and go, yeah, this would be right for this. Worst mindset you could have. You know, and so he told me that, and I thought, well, how could that be the worst when that's what inspired me and fueled me to do this? And he went into some explanation. When he picked a few pieces, I was thinking, it doesn't show me at my best. He goes, you have to have some of it in your back pocket that you don't show. Don't, just like playing poker or, you know, championship pool. Don't show your hand right away. Be a hustler and let the other guy win for a minute, and then take him for everything he's got. And that is absolutely, you do have to be a hustler, and that is actually the truth. And it was not subterfuge, but it was preparing me for some of the harsh realities that a lot of times you're not going to get the big cover gig or the gatefold, say, on your first 10 tries probably, but it doesn't mean they don't like your stuff. But they say, we would like you to do this little head of a gargoyle, or we would like you to do this logo. And you're going, exactly what I don't want to do. And there's a lot of people that turn that stuff down. You need to prove to them that you can work. You can, number one, accept a commission, and number two, fulfill it on time. I can't stress that enough. You know, have a work ethic and really stick to it. It is a job. Some people have neglected that idea completely. It's a job. I'm employed with the record companies that hire me, and I work for book companies too. I've got a hardback book I'm going to show you a little bit later that has eight of my illustrations and a cover, and I'll show you that's some of the other side of things that I do. But I learned these things from Herb Fink and from Ed Shea, and like I said, they were tough. They weren't nurturing. It was almost brutal, but it had to be. And like I said, after 3 semesters with Ed Shea, I couldn't believe the painter he turned me into from what I was. And he was tough to the point where you'd think he's mean. But when it was over, this is funny. Years later, his daughter came to me for drawing lessons. And I saw the name and I said, Is your dad Ed Shea? He goes, yes. That was just, my heart just froze like I drank antifreeze. It's like, yeah. Here's, so we got started and I told her how I said, you have to bring a notebook every day. We're going to have things to write, and it's always going to relate to what lesson we're learning, no matter what project you're on, blah, blah, blah. And so I met with him a few weeks after she had finished her first project. Well, it was a few weeks in and she had finished the first project. And he goes, I want to meet with you. And I thought, oh, gee, he's going to, And so he came in, shook my hand, very different. He had shorter, he didn't have the ponytail and the beard anymore. He was different, but I recognized him instantly, that face in my nightmares, And he said, I'm very impressed with Marina's, with her sketchbook. I'm very impressed with what you've got her going so far. And I was so relieved. And I said, so do you want us to go this and this? He goes, oh, well, I'm not going to impose anything. That's between you two. He goes, I like where everything is going. And I thought I'd never hear words like that. But then he told somebody else, which it got back to me. He goes, tell Brad that I went easy on him in school. He did not go easy on me. He goes, I did, though, because I knew he'd be good. Now, I loved hearing that. The man did not go easy on me. If that was easy, well, of course, I saw how much harder he was on some other guys who played around. Boy, he didn't put up with any BS. I mean, none. One girl, famous story, I won't say her name, was working on a 30-inch watercolor, and she had made a technical error, and mold was in between the two layers of paint, and you have you solidify a layer and break it up with rabbit skin glue. I'm not going to go into all that. And then you do another layer, and you get a color when 2 colors are put together. And I still work that way with acrylics and oils and all that. And he said, you've done this wrong. You're going to have to scrape that away before that mold gets any mold. Each week it had to advance. And he goes, now you're going to have to take an X-Acto knife and cut that out. But he goes, but believe me, I can show you how to put another piece behind it and meld it in there, but you have to do it. On the 3rd week, she hadn't done that. And all the pieces are up. You had to show your progress, and all the pieces were up, and it got to her part. You're supposed to stand up, and they called them the juries. You're supposed to stand up and defend your piece. Say all you want to say, but when you sit down, you're done, and it's his turn. And she got up to speak, and he goes, hold it. He took a lighter out of his pocket, and I'm not making this up. He goes, I want you to take yourself and that piece of shit outside and burn it.
Oh, man.
And so we went by the window. We were up 2 stories, and we went out to the window and looked out the sidewalk. There she was with tears rolling, and that painting was on fire and curling up. I've never forgotten that. Boy, we were straight-faced back at work. Yeah, I was like, oh, yes, sir. But he had to be that way. He said, this is not going to be playtime. A lot of people think an art major is going to be easy. You think it's going to, I'll just set up shop and everything I do will sell. No. It's a fool's game if that's what you think. It is a job, it is work, and it does require skill. A lot of people just don't want to face that.
Yeah. What were some of the things that Shea was particularly like a stickler for, or did it just vary by the student?
Technicality was first in his mind, because he says if you don't learn how, you're doing nothing. If you haven't learned that, he goes, but that's not the be all end all. And see, a lot of people get super slick technically, and their picture has nothing to say or has no feeling, no atmosphere, no, it doesn't. It's static. And I've seen a lot of that stuff. Like if you were to draw an exploded view of a brake drum, okay, you're not going to put emotion into that. You're not going to put feelings in it, and it's not going to tell somebody about you. It's an illustration assignment. Now that's one way to look at technicality, but the whole picture is you don't want to just do that your whole life. You also want to do pictures that come from in here and people who see it relate to it. They look at one image you've done that might have 1,000 things in it or one thing in it, but there's a story to be read in that, and that's communicating to your audience. And he drove that home quite well, because you'd get up there and you do your juries and say whatever, and he go, well, I'm not getting that, and say, well, maybe we're disagreeing. He goes, no, we're not disagreeing. Here's what it should have had. And when he told you what it should have had, it was amazing. You're going, oh, yeah, all right, I'll fix it. Well, we're moving on to the next project, but when you do fix it, bring it in, but we have to start the next one. And a lot of times, yeah, I fixed and changed according to what he said. And a lot of people are like, oh, don't have somebody tell you what to do with your art. Oh, yeah, when you're still learning, someone tells you what to do. And an art director is going to tell you what to do. Even some of the bands I work for will look at something, and a week after I finished it, go, one thing is bothering us. Like, what is it? Tell me now, and it might be something small. I said, don't worry, we can have that fixed, and it usually is something tiny. It's never a major change.
Right.
And I always told them, I said, I give the bands progress shots every 2 to 3 days. And then sometimes I'll say, like, okay, now I have another project due, so you won't hear from me for 2 weeks. And if you get worried, get in touch, but I have to finish this I have another deadline, then I'll be right back on your project. That'll happen. But I'm very good at keeping people abreast as to what's happening. And that's if I have to give advice to somebody, you got to learn how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do that, So, I'm kind of losing track of the original question, but the direction I learned from both of those men, both of those professors, is sticking with me, and every bit today. I still use all of it, and I say some of the sentences they said to me to the people that used to take lessons from me. I've had many students over the years, but it's in pieces, and I'm not doing that right now. I have a lot of requests. People going, oh, I'd really like to take a lesson from you right now. I can't do it right now. I'm doing lots of freelance work and commission work. I really don't like using the word freelance because I'm actually employed by these I'm working for 3 record companies right now and a book company, and I'm loaded. It's when people get a hold of me and go, can we get this in 3 weeks? I said, no, I've got 4 projects ahead of you. It won't be 3 months till I can even get to yours. And they're very dismayed by that, but they don't realize these things. There's been quite a few great projects I could have done and would have done, but couldn't fit it in the schedule.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I mean, that's the testament of having your own unique style and just this legacy to continuously advance upon. It doesn't happen overnight, and that's
no. But you can actually, when you see my very first pieces, even back in high school, you can actually see a trail of what I was doing then is still evident in what I'm doing now. And I used to think, no, I've come so far, I'm not even the same mentality. And then I look back at an old piece from high school or first year of college, like, I was trying to do all that. It failed miserably, but it's in there. And some people have noticed that too. They go, oh, this looks like you were doing this before you knew how to do it. I said, that's exactly correct.
Yeah. So even when you were like, before high school, just like as a kid, how did you stumble into art then?
I was drawing before I could write. And it was dinosaurs and hot rods, all in the same drawing.
Nice.
And the volcano in the background, and not too far from what I do now. I had to ask my grandmother how to write the word roar, and I would put a caption balloon, comic book style, to a T-Rex or a Brontosaurus's face. And I'd have a car popping a wheelie, and it would say roar also behind the car, but I would put these things together, and all of my teachers, starting in first or second grade, all recognized that I was highly creative. And that disturbed my dad a little bit, but he slowly learned to accept, that I wasn't going to be a coal miner. I was going to do this. And that's what he wanted me to do, is go into coal mining or go into the military. And I didn't want either. I wouldn't have fit. It wouldn't have worked for me. They would have sent me home.
Yeah. Was that really common in the town that you grew up in then? Like kind of a coal mining town?
I grew up in Harrisburg, Illinois, which is a coal mining town. And you were expected to do that or work at the radiator repair shop or a farm. There weren't that many opportunities, and that's, not knocking anything. That's just what it is in that area. And they said, well, how are you going to get work around here? And I said, that's the secret right there. I'm not going to stay around here, because I've lived in California and other places. And that was how to make it work, to make it happen, because I'd have to go to these conventions and meet people and travel. And sometimes I'd find a city I liked and stay for a little while, and was able to do that with money coming in, and then, but sometimes a project would be canceled, or we're going to put this off to next year. So now you're unemployed. These things happen, but they happen in every employment situation.
Right.
You can work in anything. I have a lot of people say, well, what are you going to do when the well runs dry? What are you going to do when a record company doesn't need your art anymore? And I said, okay, if you owned a bread store, how many loaves of bread are you going to sell 3 months from now on a Wednesday? Well, you don't know. So what are you going to do when that month comes and no one buys your bread? I said, you're not thinking of that, are you? I said, I'm not thinking of that either. Although I'm prepared, monetarily and everything, I'm prepared. I've got cushion to fall back on.
Yeah, I've always found it interesting that people have that type of comment, and it's usually towards people that are younger and stuff. But I have a corporate job. I could lose that tomorrow, and I would have the same skills, and I could apply it at a different company if I felt like it. And you have all these art skills you could just apply somewhere else. So it's the same type of thing.
Yeah, because I've done storyboarding for TV commercials. You wouldn't recognize it. I did a little bit for MTV years ago that doesn't have my name on it. That for the 3 seconds of what you can see that I did, because it was working with a team of people, it's in there. But and these things, it's a nice paycheck. But then you go on, and it's like I can't prove my name isn't on a lot of it. That's why I don't do a lot of computer art, because the image is owned. I don't do any computer art because the image is owned by the company or somebody else. And when you get a certain job to, you're going to do a certain layer, 1 or 2 layers, or you're going to do the hair on a character or whatever. And then somebody else does something else, but then it's signed, or a lot of it is not signed at all, And so you're just, it's an hourly wage job in that sense. But you have to get started. So that's something to start with. But I've talked to a lot of people who went into computer graphics and all that. And this keeps happening, who in 10 or 11, 12 years got out of it, went back to school and learned how to paint, because they realized, like, I'm making the same money now 10 years that I was then, because they don't want you to, they don't have to pay for a whole lot of it. It's really the truth. And in computer job, it's just, you're back to the Henry Ford assembly line, the American ideal of being a faceless, nameless cog in a machine that's replaceable. But if you're the best one, then by gosh, God bless you, buddy. And that's what you do, that's America. Whereas in Europe, the business model for, if a kid shows artistic ability at all, they guide that child, boy or girl, through the schools and through where they're going to go. And they all have, astoundingly beautiful careers if they can, maintain it. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. That's a lot of what people aren't getting. Because they always say to me, "Oh, that must be easy," or "That must be fun." I enjoy it, but is it fun? Not when a heavy deadline comes up, or they want changes at the last minute. All these things happen, and it's sometimes the work gets piled on. We also need this. We also need this. Sorry to hit you with this, but we're going to adjust the contract and give you this much more money. But anyway, let's make this happen. So you could say no, but then you're out. So I don't say no, but these things, that stuff happens. But like I said in the beginning, the computer jobs are computer art jobs are good for people who are good at that stuff and great to get started. But a huge number of them that I used to know have all gotten out of it and gone back into doing like the fine art approach. Because when you do a painting, that's a real painting, with paint and a brush and all that, you get money down to get started and you sign your contract. Right? Then you do your work, meet your deadline. Then you get paid whatever your contract says for the delivery of the work, which is usually on a jump drive or just scan it and send it, And then when that comes out, if you got the correct contract, then you're making money on the sold pieces, your residuals. And then you've got the original to sell in a gallery. What have you got when you do digital art? Think about that real hard. You don't have anything. And when I tell that to people, they go, "Well, you're just prejudiced." No, try to tell you want to make a living at this. This is what you're facing. Know what you're getting into. And a lot of people don't want to hear that. That's not the romantic idea of how they've imagined it. They all want to be Miyazaki and do, anime and all this stuff. And I said, well, go for that. If you're good at it, get into it, but understand where you're going to be for quite a while before you become Miyazaki,
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems like even within the metal sphere, because I've had a couple of these conversations now, your level of like professionalism and having like standard operating procedures with the contract and when all the timing of these things come, I feel like a lot of younger artists aren't there yet. And It's not even like they're not professional, like sure they can maybe do it on time, but like even having these things like encoded in them, it's pretty impressive to hear just like this.
Well, the thing is this, a lot of art schools, there's some great ones. And then there's some that, I've talked to people who said, I didn't learn anything in art school. I said, well, I don't know where you went. I don't know the teachers. I got lucky. And that's what I'm understanding. Very fortunate with the people that taught me, the classes I got. And it's not the case for everybody, but learning these things before you jump into it. Now, there are cases of people who are self-taught. They've jumped into it and earned while they learned. And I could name a few names, but the point is that they made it work. That's just not a thing that will always, you can't count on that. Right. Not everybody can count on that. There will be people, there are people now, people in the past, and people in the future that are able to do that. But I tell most everybody, I tell you got to have a firm foundation first. You can't go and work on car engines if you've never used tools. And that's just the truth. And I also tell people too, I said, you still need to learn pencil and pen and ink and paint. You really do. If you really want to be outstanding on the computer and all that, if you really want to, they don't think they have to do that. And I said, well, but when it comes time and someone says, sketch this up real quick during this meeting we're having. Oh, well, I'll go get all my equipment. No, we need you to sketch this up right now. They're in trouble. As I've met a lot of young artists who've got great ideas, but they can't draw a hand. And a hand just baffles them. And they can't draw. They get like the thumb, one thumb here, and the other thumb is on the other side like this. And and they're not thinking. I'll point that out. The thumb points towards the body, no matter which way, And they go, oh, didn't realize that. And I get other people who don't understand how to put colors together, so they just go through the computer until they find something they like and spend days doing that. You have to know. You have to have an instinct for it. You might try something and go, ooh, it doesn't work like I thought it would. For the most part, if you got your act together, it comes together very quickly. And it has to. When they want quick fire sketches and things like that, they don't want you to set up, 3 screens and tick, 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 and here, I'll send all this to you. They want to see you do it. They do. That's really the truth. Just ask the guys that do storyboards. Just ask them.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, I also think to your point too, like, excelling in handmade art just makes you more decisive too, because with the computer it's like infinite possibilities, and it's like, when is something done? Whereas when you're so used to working handmade, you're like, okay, I'm pretty sure this is done. It's like it's a little clearer sometimes.
I feel it right in here, and I've talked to other people say the same thing. When you get there and go, oh, it's just a satisfaction level, if satisfaction is the correct term. But you feel it when you've struck gold, when you did it. There's one that I'm working on right now for Child Bite, if you're familiar with them.
I'm not.
And they have great videos with some of the people from Rob Zombie movies in them. It's
okay, cool.
It's like if Dead Kennedys met Voivod met Mr. Bungle. It's not really death metal, but it's still metal. And the thing I'm working on right now, it's one of those that it's just gelling daily. Every time I work on it, I'm like, oh, this thing is painting itself. That's rare, because there are some that you're going, I'm not sure. If you're not sure, show it to the band and let them make a decision, And another thing is, when in doubt, leave it out. That's something to repeat to yourself. If you go, well, I'm going to put this over here. Let's see what happens. Put a piece of tracing paper over the work you're going to do and sketch it first and see how that looks. Move it around a little bit. And you go, oh, I shouldn't. Good thing I didn't put down paint marks, because that won't fit now. Use tracing paper. You can move it around, see what you think. Draw it on there like that and go, good thing I didn't load up a brush and draw something in there and realize I got to take all that down and repaint that area now. Use tracing paper. I highly recommend, because you can, if someone says add a face over here, draw the face, put it in the spot they want, move it around a little bit, go, okay, that's where it should be, rather than trying to do the face 4 times and going, wow, I just can't get this to work.
Right. Yeah. And time is of the essence when you have so many projects.
No, well, yeah. It was like any job, though. Time is of the essence, no matter what job you're working. Any kind of work, in the arts, out of the arts. You work mail, working at a post office, whatever you do. Bread stores, we were saying earlier. Time is always of the essence.
Yeah. Kind of a segue in a way. In essence, you're talking about kind of less is more, and it makes me think a little bit of Frank Rosetta's approach for painting, where so much shit is like a strong, iconic image, and there's supporting pieces, but you always know where to direct your eye with his work, which is why it's so legendary. And I know that you recently went to the museum in it's Boca Raton, Florida, right?
No, that's the second one. We went to the one where he used to live in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, you might tell a little about that?
What was the name of the city that No, no, that Frazetta's museum was in when we went. What's the name of the city it was in? Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And that's where we saw his old house. Well, I mean, some of the family still live there, but there's pictures of him with George Lucas and stuff right there around the gardens and everything where we were, you know. And the death dealer was there and all that. But what do you want me to say? What do you want me to say about the experience of going there?
Just like seeing his work in person and stuff.
It was of course it's mind-boggling. It's a cliche to say that, but it really was, because this is stuff that I had seen when I was 14 and 15 years old and just galvanized into looking at it. Wow, this is up there with the Sistine Chapel in my mind, you know. And then seeing the originals and how little some of them were and how big some of them were. I mean, the death dealer was nearly 3 feet high, you know, and it's like I wasn't expecting that. As a guy on a horse, I thought it would be small, you know. And he just went with how he felt. He would just decide this has to be a big piece. He'd use the same approach and the same techniques and make it work, you know. But I talked with his son, Frank Jr., and Frank Jr., apparently they were expecting me. I mean, I just sent a message saying, what are your hours? Because we're going to be coming by. And then when I got there, they looked right at me and said, are you Brad? Are you the death metal guy? And I said, oh, this makes, I can die now. You know, the Frazetta people, the whole family knew me, you know. So anyway, Frank Jr. took me around. There was only like 2 other people there at the time. We came early. And he took me around and told me technical secrets. I mean, every question I asked, I was wondering if anything was a secret. You know? And he explained all of it, you know, and I'd say a few things or whatever. And he would point out that sometimes Frank was unhappy with how something looked in reproduction, like on the book covers or whatever. When he got the painting back, he'd actually fix a segment so the painting looked better. And some people were thinking, is this the real one? Because it doesn't match, whatever. That's dangerous. But if you're Frank Frazetta, you can get by with it, you know?
Yeah.
But it was stunning to, I went 2 days while we were there. I went 2 days. I put a day in between where we did some other things. And when I say we, it's my girlfriend and myself. And the second day I went, what I noticed was that the colors that I thought on the first day that almost looked the oranges and reds looked neon, the pinks looked neon. They were really bright. The second day I went, they looked very subdued, like a warmer humming glow. And I was thinking, you know, now that's, I don't know how to describe that phenomenon, but I was looking at that. I had a sketch pad with me. There's photos of this on my Instagram page, and I've got the sketch pad on my. I made all kinds of notes and things, and as Frank Jr. was talking, I wrote down a lot of what he said. You know, and of course, now people are going to say, "Are you using that now in your work?" Not yet. Not yet, but it was astounding. But his pencil pieces are there. Some of the most famous, the one I was hoping to see was there. Lynn Carter's Black Star, the cover of that book is there. It's magnificent. And he said that was George Lucas's favorite also. So I felt validated by that. And I was like, oh, he and we're playing golf next week. And there's pictures of him with Clint Eastwood there, and when Clint was with Sandra Locke and all that, when Frank was painting the movie poster for The Gauntlet, and Frank's wife is just in all these photos is just Google-eyed at Clint Eastwood, and all these photos just going, you know, and he's kind of grinning and being nice and all that stuff. You know, he's real tall and tough looking and all that stuff. You know? And the funny thing is that Frazetta, Frank and Clint look a little bit alike. Mm-hmm. They resemble each other just a tiny bit. They look like they could almost be related. You know, so they got along wonderfully well. And then there's pictures of him with George Lucas and all that, and the pre-production sketches for the cartoon Fire and Ice, and they were running Fire and Ice continually. So if you want to sit down for a little bit and take a break, you can watch the cartoon. You know, at any given point where it was. But it was pretty throttling, and it was what I expected, and then more than I expected. In fact, right when we got to the front door, I told Sandy, I said, we have to pause for just a second. I said, I just have to take a breath of air and think about what we're about to do. And I have 1 foot on the step and 1 foot on the sidewalk. I said, just a second. And I just kind of got myself together. I said, all right. I had the sketchbook ready. Just like, then I walked in and was immediately put at ease when they said, are you Brad? You know, as I was figuring they probably don't get too many long-haired guys in there. And while we were there, they were headbangers all over the place. So it was tons of them. Some of them were from Sweden. You could hear them talking, and their English was broken, but they could say enough. And they said what band they were from. I couldn't understand the diet. And we are. I have no idea what that. Oh, excellent! I have no clue.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Yeah, I'm hoping maybe I'll try to do like a museum tour where I'll go to the Dolly Museum in Florida.
I've been there.
Yep.
Yeah.
My parents have been there, but I haven't yet. And
Oh.
and then see Frazetta as well. Those are probably two of my favorite painters.
Oh gosh, yes. The Dolly Museum will tear your head off. He
Yeah.
has, I don't know if you know this, but he was instrumental in creating what's the word I'm trying to say, honey? The projected image. Holograms, yeah. And there's a hologram he did of Alice Cooper there in an electric chair with a brain rotating above his head. And you can walk right through it or go to the back and see the back, but the face kind of shows through. You know, it's transparent, but just enough to still be 3D. And you can just walk right through the image. And it's him in an electric chair being shocked, you know. And it's incredible to look at. And I looked around thinking, where is this projected from? And I thought that I figured it out. There's several beams happening at once to make all this happen. And Dolly could figure those things out. But he was the typical high-level genius in that he also couldn't manage things. Like he couldn't figure out how to figure change when you pay for something.
Mm-hmm.
He couldn't figure exact
like a
change.
savant.
He had to write it down, and he couldn't do it if he didn't have a piece of paper. And he used to forget that his car needed gas. He would forget. He'd go, I'm stopped again. You know, he'd make a call at some village in Sicily or wherever he was, you know, and they'd say, well, you know, Uncle Salvador, did you check the gas? No. You know, he's, you know, volatile and all that stuff. So someone drove him around because they said, yeah, Dolly should never be behind the wheel no matter what. Anyway, he didn't pay enough attention. His mind is going too many places, you know. But he was that standard high functioning genius. He's one of the highest IQs of the 20th century.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No, you know who James Woods is? I mean, he was like an actor, and then apparently he has an extremely high IQ, like really high.
Yeah, he's a member of Mensa and all that. Yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of your style, then, at least in terms of what people most, you know you for, how much of that was like intentional versus kind of like accidental? Like, do you kind of have an answer for that?
Well, there are, not to sound like Bob Ross, but occasionally there are happy accidents. For me, a happy accident is when I'm looking at my palette where I mix my colors and I see 2 or 3 colors together I would have never put together and see how great that looks. And I think, where can I put this in this picture? Because this is dynamite. How can I work? And that'll happen. So there might be, the only other times that I just improvise is I don't plan out where every rock and every twig goes. I know that there will be rocks here. There will be twigs here. There will be bones here, however that goes. And I'll feel that out as I go. But I'm very much, when I get the idea is very like 80% concrete in my head as soon as I get it. And I start sketching. Now, sometimes the sketch will be like, ooh, this needs to be further up now that I look at it, or this needs to be set back, or more of this has to be pulled across. Now, you do that, and there is an editing process, and there should be, because if you just go with your first idea all the time, you know, and I do make some color. If I'm not sure what the color is going to be, I'll do some tests of my own on cheap sketch paper. And just work it out, and I'll look at it and go, ooh, I'm glad I did that because that won't work. Or another time, it's like, oh, dynamite, let's get started. This is great. You know, the best feeling of it possible is that you're not drafting the image into negative space, that it's already there and you're uncovering it. That is the greatest feeling. It's like this ellipse of the energy I'm putting in is giving me energy back. And as you're working, you're in the zone. And to get in the zones, a lot of times you don't. A lot of times it's like, man, I cannot find the rhythm today at all. You know, I need a cup of tea. I need to take a shower. I need to take a walk. I need to go take some photos. I need to do something else and get my mind clear. What I do is I sit down and play guitar. And all of a sudden I'll be playing and I'll just stop dead and go, I know exactly what to do now without having thought about it. Other times I've gone to bed and dreamt the solution to something that's nagging me in a work or in several works sometimes. And I think, oh yeah, why wasn't that obvious? But I have to get away from it for moments to make it, you know, all gel together. But style-wise, I didn't sit down to go, what's my style going to be? I'll do this because that won't work. The only thing I was really, really conscious about is don't imitate my favorite artists. You know, there's this guy, one of the brilliant painters that inspired me is a man named Jeff Jones. And Jeff Jones is dead now and all that stuff. But when I first saw his work sword and sorcery paperback books, and was already familiar with Frazetta. When I saw his stuff, I thought, okay, that's it. I have to be a painter. How do you do this? How do you get the flesh tones and the smudge inside a woman's wrist? And I mean, all that, other than all the bombastic stuff, he had little things going on in there that was just so, extraordinary. Now, let's go back to college for a minute. We were told, Ed Shea told us, he said, bring in examples of books, magazines, whatever you got, of artists you're inspired by. Well, I brought in a lot of fantasy work. I brought in Frazetta and all that, and I had some Jeff Jones. He wasn't familiar with the fantasy guys. He was with the genre, but not the names. And he thumbed through several, and there were 2 paintings by Jeff Jones in there. As he thumbed through and he's talking to me, he kept going back to Jeff Jones each time. He said, what's this guy's name? And I told him, he goes, of all the people you're showing me, this guy paints from the soul in here. Because the other ones are all painting from their head. They're all doing the most technical exercise they can. And he says they are putting blood and guts in there, because this guy is painting 100% from the soul. And I kind of knew that before he told me. But when he said that, it solidified in my head. I thought, all right, this is the guy, this is the person, this is the example that I need to, exalt myself. But I made absolutely certain that my paintings don't look anything like Jeff Jones's, and they don't. Because people say, really? Because your work doesn't look anything like his. And I said, thank God. I said, but there's no way it could anyway. And he's like a man who can't speak and could deliver all of Shakespeare's sonnets on his hands. He's a man like that.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal what he can do with just a few lines, or with a whole 6-foot, portrait or something or whatever. It'll take you places. And Frank Frazetta said that Jones, he felt, was the greatest living painter when they were all working together in the 70s.
Wow.
He said that Jones is the greatest one he'd ever seen.
Yeah, I got to do some digging.
Oh yeah, I recommend it.
Yeah,
I recommend it. Now, some of it you'll look at and go, "What?" But see a whole body of his work. See 10 pieces at once, and it will turn your head around. Especially how he does flesh and water, air surrounding. It's just like, holy goodness sakes, how is he making this happen? Somebody told me that he would set out his colors, take his brush and dip into several colors at once, and then just start. And so it's picking up different purples and oranges and whatever, and then just take another brush and smooth it all out. And it would be perfect flesh tone, or a tree or a rock, and it fit with oranges and purples in it. And you looked at it going, oh yeah, if you hadn't pointed that out, I wouldn't have realized that there's oranges and purples in this rock or this girl's face. And it just magnificently works. I challenge people to try and make that work.
Yeah. Oh
yeah,
man.
That's Bruce Lee stuff.
I would love to see like a demo. Like somebody I also really like is Kim Jong-ji, recently passed away, but I loved watching him just draw freehand, just live.
He takes a brush pen and just goes. Yeah.
Yeah.
He just goes. Yeah.
One of these.
Yes. Oh yeah. And I have a few of those. People have said, "You think you can do that?" I said, "Not to that guy's level, but I've taken part at some of the conventions and the art shows where they said, let's have everybody draw and just go, and sometimes I'll have a set thing to start with. And I thought, well, I got to break that habit. Anybody who's seen me do this more than once is going to think I'm just repeating myself. And I didn't want to repeat myself, but I haven't done a whole lot of that. Just go from a blank. I would do more. The opportunities aren't really there. Do you know what an exquisite corpse is?
Yeah.
Okay, we've done that a few times, and I've actually said, when they said, what can we do for an activity at this art show? I said, let's have all of us do a big, a large one. And I said, well, fold the paper to where you get like a foot square. You do your square, don't let the other guy see it, and then intrude a little bit into the other square. Fold it to where they only see the couple lines you added, and they take those 2 lines, 3 lines, whatever, and they do their own square. When you undo it and you're not supposed to talk about what you did and what the other guy did. And when you undo it, you will find that several people have ideas that connect, and I guess it's all psychic or whatever, and there will be connections in there, and it happens every time.
That's so cool.
That's extraordinary. I mean, there's a wavelength that's going through all these people,
You still do a lot of conventions now, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I can't, well, galleries are a lot of people, a lot of metal people and people who are like the stuff I do wouldn't go to a gallery. They don't feel comfortable there, and I don't blame them. You feel like you're in a classical violin concerto where you don't clap. It's like, you feel like that if you breathe while they're playing cello or whatever, the music might break and fall on the floor. And so the conventions, and I make fairly big sales at most all the conventions I go to, big or little. In fact, the little ones I do better. and they're really good at promoting. This is the guy that does tomb mold and all that stuff. And that because there will be metal people that show up. They will, and they're looking around going, "Wow, how'd you do this? How'd you get in here?" And I said that everybody should do this. You know who Adam Burke is?
Mm-hmm.
Adam.
Awesome.
Okay, I asked him 4 or 5 years ago if he wanted to do a show, an exhibit together. He moved out to Portland. That's a great art area.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, that'd be great. I said, scour the galleries. Maybe we can find a place to do a show together. He wasn't up for that because he doesn't like to be in public. He doesn't like to answer, like to stand around with a whole bunch of people listening to him talk. He told me he's uncomfortable with that. And Mariusz Lewandowski, who we just lost him about a year ago by now. I asked him the same thing. I said, you want to do a gallery show? I said, it doesn't have to just be you and me. We could get some other people. And he turned it down too. Then I found out later from other people, I said his English was very poor and he didn't want to appear unable to communicate. I didn't know that. His typed answers were all
right.
Maybe someone else was doing it. Maybe he had a translation device. I don't know. But yeah, I suggest the gallery show thing, but do it in conventions and do it at comic book shows and all that. But I also set up a 3-day metal fests. I'll set up a merch booth. That's the same thing as a merch booth, but it's all an art display. I've got an 8-foot tomb mold Manor of Infinite Forms backdrop behind me. It's just huge. And I use that as my backdrop. And then I've got all the originals there. I don't have too many at the same time because of insurance. If 4 or 5 got damaged, that's a big insurance claim, And so far, no, I've only ever had one painting damaged, and it was fixable. But where I was going with this, but yeah, that I highly recommend doing exhibits, and you don't have to do it with the stuck-up galleries. You don't have to.
Right. Yeah, I'm familiar with in Atlanta. They have Dragon Con, so it'll be a lot of fantasy artists and stuff.
I'd like to do that one. I just haven't gotten through. I have friends who've gone there, and I said, "Boy, I need to do that." But it seems to occur when I'm doing something in another state. It's like, wow, I haven't been able to do that. There's one near me called Full Terror Assault, 3 or 4 day metal festival.
Okay.
And it's got big, and I've never been able to make my schedule fit. And that's one where I wouldn't have to have a hotel room. I could drive back and forth. It's only an hour and a half away from my house, and it's like, goodness sakes, why can't we make this one work? But it's time wise. It just won't happen,
Yeah. Are there any shows or an online store, anything that you'd like to plug? Where could people basically purchase your work? Anywhere online?
I have a website that's back under construction, so I can't say it this time. It's artwizard.com, but bradmoreartwizard.com, www. But right now I wouldn't say it's down, but there's very little to see because my friend Jerry is reconstructing it. So at this moment, don't go there, you guys. Don't go there just yet. But hit me up on Facebook or Instagram because I sell prints of almost everything, color prints of almost everything I've got. And but guys, I'm not open for private commission right now, and I got to try. I know it disappoints a lot of people. I got to turn that down a lot. I am way too busy right now with the stuff that pays the rent and with my job. So my job is doing these album covers and working for book cover companies and a little bit of comic book work coming up. Unfortunately can't talk about it. So we'll see. But there is, my roots are in horror comic books. There's a little bit of comic book work coming up around the bend, and later when they allow me to say more about it, I will, but I can't right now.
That brings me to another question is how do you go about those different mediums then? So with comic work, you're doing, ink and brush pen, stuff like that. And then that's versus your acrylic painting for your album artwork, right? So
when comic book work, the technical approach to it is the same as doing T-shirt art if you're working in line. Now, the difference in working in ink, comic book style, and painting is ink is line work, so is pencil, and painting is working in form. It appears to be the illusion of 3 dimensions. And you have to have a different mindset. And I've had a few people, they say, are you drawing? Are you working on painting this afternoon? I said, no, I'm working on drawing. They go, oh, it's the same thing. No, it isn't. It sure isn't. It may all be art. That's like saying subtraction and multiplication are the same thing just because they're both math. No, they're polar opposites, and it's the same with drawing and painting. You have to have a different mindset, but a lot of practice and a lot of familiarity will guide you through all of these things, and a lot of experience. That's what it takes. It's just doing it, and being a good observer of how someone else does it, but without copying what they do. You can learn from somebody and not copy their style, you know. And a lot of people, they can't break away from that. It's like having training wheels, and they can't go without the training wheels. They go, well, I have to do this like Bernie Wrightson does a hand, and I have to do this like, you know, Dan Seagrave does a castle and all that stuff. I said, well, okay, learn from those men and do it the way you see it in here, you know, or the way you feel it in here. Try that. And it's hard to get people to do that. They're afraid to take off the training wheels, you know. And there's a lot of, in the comic book world, there's a lot of imitators of Bernie Wrightson. There's a lot of imitators in the metal world of Dan Seagrave, because I think he's like the Frank Frazetta of our, you know, of our thing, because he really popularized, and I give him all the credit. He popularized the fact that this stuff isn't just the kind of sketches you see on somebody's math notebook. And on every notebook, don't we all have goblins and demons and skeletons and naked boobs and fire and somebody saying something they shouldn't be saying, you know? And a lot of people say, well, metal art is just like that stuff. It's just like sketches in the margins of, you know, of your notebook or whatever. And I said, some of it is, but a great deal of it is highly evolved, highly skilled work. And I would point them to him and some of the other guys, you know, and they were stunned by that. But then they'd say, well, it's not much different than Dungeons and Dragons work. It's related, but I think it's very different. It's related though. They're not in the same genre, but they're in the same wheelhouse.
Mm-hmm. And as far as like your paintings, then you talked a little bit about, you know, doing like concept sketches before you hit it, but like, what does that full process look like? Because if you're using acrylic, a lot of your paintings look more like oil to me. So I'm curious if there's any.
Yeah. Well, it starts off with a pencil sketch to show the band, and you also have to show the band's manager sometimes, and you got to show the record company. And because the record company, if it's iffy, maybe the distribution company won't handle it if it has a lot of gore or something. I've encountered that. I go, no, you got to change the concept, not the concept, but change the content. You know, take some of the gore out. And the band's like, oh, and I said, well, if you guys had a different distributor, we wouldn't be facing that. But these things happen. It happened in comic books a lot too. But what I do is I start off with a pencil sketch, and when it's okayed, when I like it, when I like it, it's when I send it to them. When I look at that and go, yeah, this is it. And I've already talked with the band. What do you want? What do you not want? You know, and there's certain things I don't want to do that I said, if you're looking for that, I can recommend other guys, but I'm not the guy to do this, you know. And then, but they usually pick me because they've seen the stuff. They go, we want the effect you got in this one and this one, but here are our ideas. Then they tell me, go, can you make that work? I said, yeah, let me get started on a sketch. And before I've ever sent a contract or charged them any money, I'll do a pencil sketch and say, hey, are we close? Before I do it. And it's not, I don't put a lot of hard work into that first one. It's about that big, about like this. And they'll go, yes or no, or I'm liking what I see. And I said, all right, if you are, then it's time for us to get paperwork out and get started and say that this is on the schedule. If they agree to that, then I send it, you know. And a lot of times I can send the contract to the band, but sometimes it goes to the manager. And in some cases it goes to like $20 Spin Records. It goes right to Dave at $20. It just depends on how it's, you know, being operated on. It's not the same thing each time. But after the pencil sketch is done, and then I decide how big it needs to be. If it has to have a lot of detail, of course it has to be bigger. And I've worked as much as 30 to 35 inches wide. I've worked as small as 20 inches long, and that's it. You know what I mean? So it just depends on how that's going to work. And if it's a real tight deadline, it has to be smaller or you won't get finished. There's that. It has to have drying time. There's all this. So after I do that, then the pencil sketch has been approved. I put colored chalk on the back of the pencil sketch and tape it to the board that I'm going to do. I used to work on Masonite, but now I just work. There's really high quality illustration board now that you can use. That's just awesome. You don't need Masonite anymore unless that's what you want. And so I put it on that, and then I take a colored pencil and trace over the pencil lines. People say, why a colored pencil? I can tell which lines I've gone over and which ones still need to be done if it's a color. The rest of it's just a normal gray pencil. So once I've gone over that and I can tell I've transferred every line, I carefully peel that off, and the entire composition has been transferred to the board in that colored chalk lightly. Then I will go in and do it all as an outline with paint, and usually a number 2 brush, like a big thick one, actually, not a little thin one, and kind of go in there and I make sure I've got every line done. And then I pick a color, which is usually an earth tone, sometimes with a little red mixed in or a little green mixed in, but usually an earth tone, and I wash the entire thing over with that. There's no white or blank area showing it all, unless there's going to be an area that has to be really strange, and I'll leave that blank because I have to work that up with something different. And that's happened once or twice.
Right.
But and then I do that, and then that's the first picture that the band gets and that the manager gets and all that. You click, and then I send that in. And if they go, I'm confused with what's happening, you have to start talking then. But if it's not, most people go, oh, thumbs up, dang, looking great. You're working faster than we expected. I love hearing that. Because I never feel like I'm working fast. I sometimes look, I'll be working all night and I think, well, I'm going to get to bed soon. And I hear the birds chirping. I've been up all night and I think, wow, and I only got this far. Damn, somebody shoot me, And but then there's other days I go, look what I did today. I got this whole section in. It's done. That doesn't even need anything. So, biorhythms, I guess. So the painting process then starts. And if you go to my Instagram page, I showed how I did worms for Everglade every 2 days, showed the differences. And then after a while, they were too similar. So I started doing it at the end of each week because they were because some people are like, looks like the same picture, but just up close. I said, no. Oh, there's another layer here. So they weren't seeing that as much. So right. I varied it, but a lot of people were telling me this is not boring. We didn't know paintings were done like this, and how it builds off of the original earth tone layer. And I do it like oil painting. It is in layers. The only thing is with this, I use a liquid acrylic. It's not
okay. I'm familiar.
Acrylics. Even with that, you should add a little water to it, but those can crack. So I use a high quality liquid acrylic that's made in Belgium, but you can get it right here in the States. I used to have to order it from Belgium, but that's all changed. Doc Martin dyes, they carry this, and so it's called Spectrum. And it's like, oh, excellent. Now I don't have to send all the way to,
Yeah,
so,
I have a few of those. Those are great.
Oh, God, it's incredible. I'm totally into it. And when I show people, they look at it and go, this is it? There's no way. And I said, but let me show you how to work with it. And then I'll show them how to do that, And there's a certain mixture that you get. Never, ever highlight everything in white, which is what a lot of young artists do. So if everybody's listening, break the habit. Don't highlight in white on everything. Maybe in the eye or something like that, here and there, a glint off a piece of metal. But what you do is take white and mix it with a gray green, and then mix that with the lightest, like not Prussian blue, but like Bonnie blue or something like that, and mix it together where you get this almost sludgy, dirty white. And do that, and then a little bit of that earth tone that's in the background, if that's what you're using, and mix it together. And then say I'm going to put a swash of purple in it for whatever. Like on the child bite thing, I just did this purple cushion that this baby skeleton is going to be laying on, and I put it all down like that. And then I took this mixture I just said, and I put that in there and work it while it's wet. It's a very aggressive wet into wet technique, most of it. And this is with the brown area already dried underneath it. So it's going on top. But it's thin enough that that's showing through in places. That's where you get the 3D or the textural elements. And then I was working on that. Now, when it dries and when it comes time to smoothing things out, don't use the same brush you just put those colors in. Have a dry brush handy. It should be a flat, any size, but small. And blend with a dry, flat brush. Always be working with two brushes for everything. Everything has to be blended. Everything has a gradation from light to dark or from smooth to rough, whatever it's going to switch to. Don't take the paintbrush that you stirred all your paints in and do that and try to work back and forth. You're just going to make a huge mess and go, why is it not working? Put your colors in, and before they set up at all, get that dry brush. Make sure it's dry on the end and blend with that. Always pulling downward, always brushing towards yourself. I have this thing where I hold it carefully between these fingers and I'll almost tap it with this finger. Is that showing up? Just like that, and when I pull it down, I'm not really tapping, but I'm just, as I pull, I'm doing this, but I can do it all in one move. That's another thing too. Don't paint like that. Paint everything one stroke, And ink too, same way. Don't ink a line by going like that. Do it in strokes. The arm comes down. Here's the elbow. Go from there to the hand, and let go. So you have a thick to thin line. Do it with paint too.
You always work at an incline.
Largely, it's kind of flat because this is liquid paint. It would run down. Until I get to the last layer. Well, the last layers are really thin, but the preliminary coats can be kind of thick. But I like to work with it just barely inclined, about like that. I don't like it. I started with the straight up thing, and it just gradually gets to where now it's, and I lean over. I got terrible posture. Lean over and working on it like this, one hand like that. For 6 to 8 hours. with movies playing in the background. That's the other thing too, is that I decide what the atmosphere needs to be in the painting. It's like, okay, this has to be morbid, or this has to be spacey, or this has to be whatever. So I pick what movies, because I have a huge, gigantic movie collection, and what music will create and sustain this mood. And for the week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks I'm working on that project, I play those things almost in the same order, not always, but some always, which would drive. That's why my studio is separate from where my girlfriend and I live, because it would drive someone nuts. But for me, I'm going, oh, good, we're getting to this one part. This is where I want to be when I'm doing these tree branches. We're getting to this other part. This is where I want to be when I'm doing this guy's flesh or this skeleton, whatever, you know. And it's conducive that way. Then when I'm done, I don't want to see or hear that stuff, because I'm working on the next one, and you can't have them all be the same. And
Right.
it will be. It will actually do that someday. You'll accidentally go, wow, I've done 3 of these that are too much alike. But that got broken out of me in the college classes too, though. It'll still occasionally happen to you when you're just sailing along on autopilot, which you shouldn't do. But you'll catch yourself doing it. I will. And I've seen other artists, brought work to me going, I'm stuck on, can you help me with this? And I said, yeah, you're on autopilot here. You're doing what you always do for that flesh and for that rock and whatever. You've got to break free. Each time you do it, it has to be a new object. And if you're going to be one of those guys with a style that shows the paintbrush strokes,
Right.
each stroke is an object, and you've got to look at it like that. Not a 3D object, but it's an object. Each stroke has to mean something. And I've seen people just, that's how I want to do the background. And I said, so what does all this mean? I said, it has to mean something. Actually, you're just being lazy at getting the background finished quickly. And I don't say it to be as demeaning as that sounded. I'm more nurturing. I said, but here's a bad habit. I said, I have it. Other people have it. Even the greats have all had it. And you have to break free of it. I said, if you get an art book and start reading, you will encounter these things I'm telling you about in those pages. They'll tell you the same thing, maybe reworded differently, but
that wash technique you do, does it basically just tie everything together even when you add colors on top of the different areas? Mm-hmm. I think that's an important lesson too, probably for some artists that just kind of just start painting one area instead of having that wash to start from.
It starts off with everything unified.
Yeah.
Well, you hope it's unified. I mean, there's got to be some times where like, oh, this area has to be yellow for a reason or whatever, and so maybe that's not in unification, but the whole, say the terrain it takes place on, the landscape it takes place on, the format or the structure that all these things are going to occur in, that needs to be unified. Okay, it's like in comic books, you start off with a picture that shows you where the action is taking place. Then there are the close-ups of the people. Then the next shot is those people in that landscape. That tells you what's happening and who's happening in it right away, without you even reading any of the caption balloons. That's comic book lore, and it's the same for all illustrations. Set up what's happening quickly. Okay, they may take 3 hours to look at all the details, but details come last. That's another thing that young artists don't want to hear. I'm very detailed, and all that comes last. Oh, it's already in my mind, and it's already in the sketch and everything, but when I work on that, that's the last thing. That's the surface gloss. That's necessary, I think, but because it gets the feeling across. Like, what does that branch feel like if I were to touch it? That kind of thing. And so it requires those details to make that happen. But the wash technique happens until I get down to the nitty gritty of each face and the hair and the folds and the cloth and however that's going to be. The brick, I'm really careful on my stone and brick surfaces, rock surfaces. Very, very careful on that, because a lot of people have said, the trick in art school, high school, they would say you take a piece of sponge and get paint on it and go back and forth like this. Well, you can see that it's the same texture, even if you turn it around. It's very easy to tell how you've done that. And people have asked me, you do that with a sponge, right? And I go, no, absolutely not. And I said, and I tell them that's why. And so I show them, and they said, oh my God, that takes too long. I said, I don't have time for that. And I said, well, I do, because this is when I get up in the morning and until I go to bed at night, that's my job. That paycheck keeps the lights on, so that's what I do for a living, So yeah, I have enough, because people say, how do you have enough time? I said, well, you're raising kids. I have no kids. You're raising kids and you have a day job, and you have my day job is doing this. I chose this. So that's what I do. So I said, I spend as many hours, or maybe a little bit more than you do at this. That's how I get it all done. Because I've had a lot of people go, there's no way. How could you get that done even in a year? And I said, well, because you spend 8 to 10 hours every day. I only take off sundown Friday night to sundown Saturday night. All the other days of the week, I work. Unless there's a break in the schedule. And believe me, I'll take that break. You know, what do? I either travel, come here to St. Louis where I am tonight, to my girlfriend's, or watch a lot of cartoons and horror movies. If I get some break, yeah. And sometimes some reading. I love to read, but boy, there's hardly any time for that anymore. So I'll listen to books on tape while I'm painting to kind of feel like I'm reading. I like all the old weird tales of Clark Ashton Smith and Robert E. Howard and those Henry Kuttner and those guys from the old weird tales pulps of the 30s. I love hearing their stories read out loud.
Nice. Any horror movies kind of that are maybe more recent that you would recommend to anyone?
Not recent. In fact, I'm going older and older as we go. It's got
okay.
There's more music in the older movies. There's incidental music happening, whereas the new movies, there's long stretches where you hear somebody breathing or whatever, and there's no music. And to me, when I'm working, I'm not actively watching the movie over here to my right. I'm picturing it in my head because it's a familiar movie, and then I'm working down here, you know. And to me, it's the atmosphere again. I overuse that word, but that's the real key word. It's created the atmosphere and it's sustaining the atmosphere. And the older movies have incidental music all the way through it. The old Hammer horror, but I like the B-grade European horror films from the late 60s all the way through to the mid 70s. Those are impeccable, unbelievable. But they'll have jarring musical compositions in it. That'll go from the morbid, scary stuff to a bunch of female singers going, you know that.
Yeah.
Somehow those directors make all that work. If an American director tried that, it would fall flat on his face, you know. But I'll ask Sandy, I said, where do you think we can get a soundtrack that's like this, you know? So I don't have to just find movies that do it, you know. But I like films by Jess Franco and Jan Svankmajer. Who's the guy I was just looking at? Andrei Zulawski, who did On the Silver Globe, which is a troublesome, difficult to get through a science fiction film. It's just shocking, brutal, but it's so deep and impenetrable. It takes multiple viewings to even grasp what's really happening in a lot of it. And then when you finally do start grasping it, you're going, oh my God, this thing's incredible. And do you know who Alejandro Jodorowsky is?
I do not.
He did The Holy Mountain. Have you heard of that movie?
Oh, yes.
Oh, gosh. First time I saw The Holy Mountain, it took me 2 days to ingest it. I couldn't watch it in one night at all. I was by halfway through, or what I'm guessing is halfway through, I was like, okay, click this off. You know,
is it really disturbing?
Disturbing and so intense and profound. And there's so much happening. It's just like, I can't quite process all this. And for a while, the first 30 or 40 minutes, you're thinking, none of this is coming together. Is this random? And when it does come together, it's a punch in the face that you weren't expecting at all. And then you're on the ride. You know what I mean? And people say what kind of movies it's like. And this is the truth. It's its own genre. It is not like any other movie you will ever see. It does not fit in any other groove other than its own thing. And he did another one called El Topo, and he's done a couple recently. They're very surreal, very, very. I think
I've heard of El Topo before.
Oh yeah, it's crazy the level of creativity that these films have on a B-movie budget. The creativity level is astonishing for what happens and how much you see in 90 minutes or 2 hours. Just astonishing. His name is Alejandro Jodorowsky. For anybody listening, I highly recommend it. But go in with an incredibly open mind. Turn off everything because it's not going to be like movies you're used to seeing. Not at all. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I just wrote that down. I got Jeff Jones and Holy Mountain. Those are the things that are sticking with me for now, but I'm sure there's a lot of other things you mentioned. You mentioned you had a book, I think, to show. Do you want to?
Oh, I've got some of the comic books. Sweetie, where we? Oh, here they are. Yeah, hang on a second. I got some here. To show you the people watching, and I've also got a hardback book that I just illustrated, just came out. But I don't do very many local projects. However, this was done. Get the light off of it. There. This was done locally. I only did the cover, and it's this. We have a cryptid in our area called the Big Muddy Monster. It's also called Omo and some other names too. But this creature. Is the glare off of it? Looks like it is.
Yeah, that looks better.
I only did the cover. The inside was done by a great cartoonist named Nathan Bonner, who's actually an animation person, but he will cartoon and illustrate, but he's largely 99% he's an animator, and he did the insides. But I did this. Now this is local, although I've been told that it's been seen nationwide, but it doesn't have a huge print run. What they do is they sell out of like 1,000 and then print another 1,000, and then when that's gone, so that's how it's done. It's truly underground, But this one, I'm very, very happy with that. Boy, I tell you, there's a shadow on that. Here we go. I'm very, very happy with how that painting came out. And it's, if you notice, it's not my usual slippery organic kind of work. It's more grounded in like we were talking about Frazetta, like fantasy art. Big rock behind them, and it's like a horror film. It's almost like you'd see on the cover of Vampirella or Eerie, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's really awesome.
And like I said, I don't do many. They were able to meet my price. I know how mercenary that sounds, but that's important. They were able to do that, so I was able to devote the time it took to make it look that good. And because some people will say, like, well, why do you charge so much? I said, well, I have to make a living. If it's going to take 3 weeks, I have to get 3 weeks worth of pay for it. And they was like, well, how about if we just do half of that and give you this, this, and this? I said, but that won't put gas in the car or food on the table. And it's a nice offer, but you have to understand it's a job and you have to do this. The carpenter that works on your house doesn't say, oh, well, I'll do it for half if I get to watch your TV during it or something. It's the same thing. You got to understand all this is work, Now, have you ever heard of, I may have to take this out of the plastic. Yeah, that plastic's going to. Have you ever heard of the book that I did, my solo comic book called Bathory, based on Elizabeth Bathory, the Countess of Blood?
I've heard of it, but I have not read it. I did see this cover, though. I think I saw it on your Instagram.
I did every ounce of this, wrote it, drew it, and it's watercolor paint. If I can, I'll get it open here in a minute. Get to a good page. This was banned in 3 states and in England and in Canada. It is, not to be provocative, but it is XXX rated. But it's not just a sex book, but it is one of the most violent, morbid comic books. And I've had people tell me, they said, holy cow, I've read the entire I read the entire run of Faust and all those other heavy comic books. I've never read anything like Countess Bathory. And I can show you a few pages, but we don't want to get flagged by YouTube. But it's, gosh, every page I go to, I don't think we can. Maybe I won't. Holy cow, there's not a page I can. It's okay. Very quickly, it's scurrilous. Like I said, I don't want to get us in trouble. So, if you're into absolutely shocking horror comic books, and this one, like I said, it got in trouble. The comic book, the company was Boneyard Press. They even took their logo off the top of it, but it is on the back. But they had to reroute sales of the book because comic book stores wouldn't carry it. They had to reroute the sales of it through record companies and tattoo parlors to get it to sell. And of course, it was a big success. It really was. Monetarily, it was a success, and honestly, critically, a big success too. Thank you, sweetie. And like I said, I've only got a couple here. This will be the last comic book because I didn't bring. Like I said, not being at my studio, I didn't bring a whole lot. This is what we've got here. Oops, that was damaged. Necrotica. I did that cover and also did about 11 or 12 pages inside. Nice. Definitely not for kids. This is really shockingly hard. The cover doesn't tell you that because we didn't want to get this one banned too, although it ended up getting banned. And it's got the great S. Clay Wilson in it from Zap Comics and Robert Crumb's Zap Comics. He's in it. He's in it. Jeff Gaither and some of the other people. Just here's some of my stuff. I hope this doesn't get us in trouble. There's a lot of castration scenes and so, yeah. So it's horrifying. Here's a black and white but a painted page I did. Try to get that in the light. That's funny how there's a shadow. I didn't do this one here. I did this one.
Huh.
It's a watercolor. That's a watercolor, not an acrylic, but the cover is acrylic. And goodness sakes, as I go through this, there's hardly anything else I can show you. This is harsh. And I never realized that until you're showing something in a forum that that could get you in trouble.
I think we'll be all right. But yeah, that's kind of crazy that those pages just only are the tip of the iceberg.
Oh yeah, very. I've had people who looked at it and said, "Oh my gosh, this what possesses you to do something like that?" And I said, Tim Tyler, if you know who he is, he's an incredible cartoonist, incredible illustrator. He's got to be the hardest working current artist that I know. The guy can crank out 30 pages in a week, and it's not simple goofed up stuff. It is immaculately detailed to the final degree, and he writes the stories and all that stuff. And some of us, like in the midst of some of the most hardcore horror, he'll have the goofiest, funniest jokes in there to relieve the stress. And then you turn the page, and oh my God, there's a woman being disemboweled by a big tentacle, and, and all that stuff. Well, he is in that book. He was the head of Fathom Press that published all those things except for Bathory. That was Boneyard Press, and he's in it, and some other people, and he and I would go to these conventions, and we would buy videotapes that back then were banned. There was a huge worldwide ban on some of these things, like movies like Man Behind the Sun, brutally shocking. The Coffin Joe trilogy, especially there's 4 films actually, because he did a later one that called The Embodiment of Evil with the Coffin Joe character. Just brutal. And the thing is, he makes his actors actually go through this. There's a scene where they gut a dead pig and all the guts fall out, and a woman climbs inside and gets sewn up inside it. They really went ahead and did it.
Wow.
Yeah, and then Tetsuo the Iron Man, which has nothing to do with Marvel's Iron Man, is this guy who's a fetishist for metal, steel and metal, and he inserts this stuff in his flesh to get excited, and all of a sudden he becomes part cyborg all by accident. It's a fantasy film, but it's rough to look at. Begotten is a film with there's no famous people star in it, but this super expressive director named Elias Marriage, and the whole thing looks like it's like you take the film and just drag it behind a tractor in a parking lot for 6 years, and then print it somehow to where all the dirt and everything is in the film with it. And it's all moving. Like if someone just has a close up of their face, it's all moving on them and everything. There's not a shot of the film that isn't like that. And it opens up with this creature committing suicide for the longest period of time, just stabbing and cutting and flinching. And after a while, you're going, how much longer is this? So all these films were banned. There's a whole longer list, but the Vasa de Noches. I may not be saying that wrong. One of the most banned films of all time. A man is on a farm, and he's by himself, and he's losing his mind. I mean, he takes like Barbie doll heads and puts them on pigeons and talks to them and all this stuff. There's just one actor in this whole thing, and he's in love with this big sow pig. That's the last one, and there are scenes of him making love to the pig, and his hands are on the nipple. Oh, it's really, you're watching it going, I thought I was unshakable, but gee. And this pig gives birth to these eraser head like hybrid baby pigs, and the whole thing isn't in black and white. It's filmed in blue and white, so it's very unnerving on this apocalypse looking farmland that he's on, mud and rain, everything everywhere. And finally, but he's disturbed by these babies because he knows he's responsible. He hangs each one of the babies. The mother sees this, goes down to the mother pig goes down, sees this happening, and goes down into this ditch, buries itself in a ditch, and smothers itself to death. And so the man is distraught because this basically is his wife. So he goes up on top of a ladder and arranges this thing and very elaborately hangs himself. And as he's hanging, and you see a whole lot of this, the camera is slowly widening out. And you find out in the last 10 seconds, World War III happened, and he was the last guy on Earth.
What?
Yeah. Yeah. These are the movies that I still kind of watch, I still collect. I've got some crazy ones, but I don't want to spend too much time on that. But Tim Tyler and I would just see to outdo each other. Look what I got. Look what I found. Here's one that I was told. And we'd get together after these conventions, and after a day's working in our studios, go, all right, whose apartment are we meeting up in? Order pizza, and we'd watch these things. And we'd go, all right, we can beat that. We can come up with grosser than that. We can come up with more disturbing than that. And that was how the comic books were done, I'm in a different mindset now, but I mean, a lot of people still say my work is still disturbing, but it's supposed to be, isn't it? You know, death metal covers and all that, doom metal cover. Yeah, it's supposed to be bleak and hard, and it's supposed to bring up those emotions that other art isn't going to bring up. Charlie Brown cartoons won't bring that up. They're made for something else, you know. And the artwork for this stuff has to serve a different purpose. And I think it's important that some people need to be disturbed. They need to be shaken out of their shell a little bit, you know. Somebody told me one time, they said, why does God allow suffering? And I said, it's because if you wouldn't fear hell if you didn't suffer. And they were like, oh, and I thought, boy, true words. Yeah, that explains it all, doesn't it? So it's true that I think this stuff is cathartic. That's a questionable term, but I think it's cathartic to see unpleasant things, to face unpleasant realities. Just like when you ride a roller coaster and you feel like you're coming close to death, and you never come anywhere close to death, and you ride it and it's over, and you're going, "Woo, that was awesome! Let's do it again." The same thing is true with this kind of gory horror art. It makes you face mortality or whatever, and maybe it's unpleasant, but it has to be. And it doesn't, to me, it doesn't glamorize this stuff. It really shows you what it's like. Because most Westerns, everybody loves a Western, don't show you what happens when those old guns shot somebody. When those people got shot with those old guns, it knocked you 6 feet back and blew a hole in you. It took out chunks of flesh. Living through it was hardly a possibility. And nowadays we have guns that are far more refined. But back then, that hot lead hit you from those old, peacemakers and all that stuff. It just blow somebody, just tear you a big chunk out, tear you apart, And Western movies don't show you that. The hero or whoever always gets shot in the arm or the leg and goes, and is able to fight and ride a horse. All that, there's no way. It's like kung fu movies. The one hit to the head, you're down. Those fights that go on 6 minutes, Bruce Lee said, utter horse crap. He said that. He goes, yeah, it's designed to take your opponent down in 10 seconds or less. But that won't make a good movie. So, so we watch a kung fu film that really doesn't present how kung fu was really fought, how it's really used, because it's exciting that way. We want to see teeth flying and bones breaking and the hero leaping 6 feet in the air. We want to see all that. Otherwise, it's disappointing. Same with the horror art. Speaking of the horror art, here's the book Horrors of War. And I did this cover. It's a wraparound, if I can do this. But this is a dust cover, so it's got to be shiny, unfortunately. I'm trying to get this. It's hard to.
I like how it wraps around there.
It's going to have a glare on it. Sorry about that, but here's the cover. Let's just look at it that way. Let's just do it in 2 sections. Here's the cover, and it's this multi-breasted creature with all the little baby ones down here. And when I say Horrors of War, these are all short stories, but they're not army stories, which is what I thought it was going to. When I first said, I'm not sure I'd be interested in that. I don't want to draw military stuff. He goes, oh, no, it's not military. It's horrible stuff in Vietnam, in the tunnels of Vietnam and Asia. And some of the stuff takes place in the past and all that,
That's really
cool. I did 8 illustrations inside. I know we won't have time to go through all of them, but I can show you one that I really like right up front. And they even list, there's a table of contents that lists where the illustrations are. I love that. Real touch of class. I did this one, which is a rat, the Rat King.
Nice.
Yeah, really don't like the lighting in here, but anyway, that's what we got to work with. But anyway, I've sold the original cover, and I've sold 6 of the 8 illustrations that are in this book. As soon as the book came out, bam, And I didn't have to go to a gallery to do that. This happened. People got a hold of me over Facebook and said, "Oh my," or Instagram. I said, "Oh my gosh, are you selling that stuff?" I said, "Oh, always, yes. What can I do for you?" And it's all, and all that, because I sell the originals. A lot of people go, "How can you let those go?" I said, "Because I'm already working on the next 4 projects." You got to let that go. That's the second half of an artist's income, selling the work. A lot of people don't want to let them go. And I said, well, then you're going to need a part-time job to augment your, unless you're working for somebody who's really paying a lot for your page rate. I don't know who that would be.
Right. That's a really good point. I just had a couple more questions, then we could actually blow up some of the paintings.
Yeah, let's get to some of that. But yeah, go ahead, though.
Well, just kind of like I can put it into one. It's just, you may have touched on it a little bit too, but best part of being a visual artist, and maybe the worst part just in contemporary times.
The best part is, for me, I fantasized when I was a kid to be an artist. I didn't know what it meant. I thought, now, am I going to paint things and hang it on a wall and someone buys it? I mean, what does it take? I didn't understand as a young kid, but I knew that I couldn't live without drawing. I could not live without it. I mean, I could draw all day, and to relax, I'd sit down and there's a scrap of paper and a pencil, and I'd be sketching something else. That's how I relaxed, was to keep doing all that. So it was almost like, as Diego Rivera says, if you're a painter, no matter what somebody says, what their opinion is, you'll paint till the day you die. And that was really true. If you're going to do this, you will do it. Whether anybody sees it, some people draw in a diary and no one sees it till they're dead, but they can't live without doing this. Same with me. But I wanted to get into my work being published. That was a thrill for me. Was I want to communicate on a large scale, and the way to do that is to get things published worldwide. Like a comic book or an album is seen on every continent in the world, not just my hometown. See, and I have people from my hometown who will say, so that stuff is just in Carbondale and Harrisburg? No, I said, when these albums come out and these comic books come out, it's seen worldwide. And they don't grasp that. And for a little while, when I first got into it, I wasn't grasping that. I was working on something that a guy in Sri Lanka would write me a letter about. And yet that happened over and over again. Somebody in Germany, there was a girl in Germany who took one of my Argus album covers and did her version of it for her painting class in her art school in Germany. She goes, I hope this doesn't upset you, but I got an A- on this, And she goes, I want to show you. I did the front half of one of your Argus covers, and she goes, and now I've got the professor's critique. I'm supposed to get yours too. So I gave her the critique on it and told her, I said, well, some of the mistakes you're hoping to find the colors I used in a tube, and my colors are all mixed. You're not going to find the blue I use and the green I use in a tube. It's right. Layers. It's stirred up. It's that thing I was telling you about when the dynamic of having something happen in your mixing palette. Oh, I never saw that before. We got to find a way to put that in there. There's all of that happening. And I told her all this in an email. And so the idea that publishing is the way to communicate globally, because one of my credos is that the media is the gallery of the present. It is, whatever media you're using, whatever it is, whatever works for you, or whatever works overall. So that was the impetus to me, was to number one, make a living at it. How do you do that? That seemed tricky, but I found out in college, I was taught, here's how you do your billing. Here's how you do that. Here's what happens. Here's what the distributor takes. And I learned all this because I didn't know. I mean, where's a book about that? Nowadays there are books about that stuff, but when I was starting, I don't think there were, or at least I didn't know about them. So I learned all of that, and I'm able to communicate that to somebody else who asked me the same questions. And some of it is distressing for them because it's, again, as I've said many times, it's a lot of effort. You have to love it, and I do. I mean, I live for doing this. I have dedicated my life to doing this.
And the worst part, I guess?
All right. This might get me in trouble. Okay, the worst part. Let's talk about the metal covers, because I think we've kind of strayed from that a little bit. But the metal covers. What's the worst part of doing it? The bands, I touched on this briefly, get a hold of you and need it in 2 to 3 weeks. They have not even thinking that if you do this for a living, you're already booked up solid. How do you know what you're doing a month from now? How do you plan to budget a month from now if you're not already scheduled for it? They're not realizing that. And a lot of these young guys, their first 1 or 2 albums, these guys are 21, 24 years old and are learning. They're learning the business too, and what it's like to work for the clubs and all that stuff. So this happens. And I'll tell them that, and they'll say, well, so we can get that pretty quickly, like in 2 or 3 weeks. I said, absolutely not. I said, but the first opening I have is this, this, and this. Oh, that'll never work. And I've tried to stress in interviews and in the zines and anything I can get that across. It's like when you start writing, let's say when you start writing your album, decide what the themes are and get an artist right then. And say, here's what we're thinking of. Are you interested in this? And we'll send you some MP3s in a few weeks when we've got some rough cuts. And we'll build it together. It has to be, as Phantom Slaughter from Worm says, a true collaboration from the start. Not like, oh, as an afterthought, in 2 weeks we need this cover. We'd like you to do it. That just won't fly, guys. It's impossible. Or you'd get the crappiest, quickest done piece of dirt. And we've all seen that, haven't we? We've all seen a cover that you look at and go, looks like their baby sister did that one, and there are those. I'm not being mean. There just are. I'm not going to name any names, but I'm not like that, So to get this high quality stuff, oh man, we really dig your stuff. We really like your artwork. We really want you to do this. To get that, you've got to appreciate my position in all of this, or just the artist that you're going to hire overall. It doesn't have to be me. and realize that they've got a schedule that's already well in motion. You know, I mean, most artists already know, and here we are about to get into March, and most artists already know what they're doing in July.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just like if someone sets up a tour for your band and it starts in March, you know where you're going to be in June or July, don't you? Because the tour is set up. It's the exact same thing. So that's one of the worst areas. That one, and when there's too many opinions about, well, the bass player's new girlfriend says there needs to be more orange in it because she likes orange and orange is symbolic to her. So can you get more orange in it? And then the other person says, well, but not too much orange. Let's do this. Oh, and by the way, can the central figure you've been working on for 5 weeks be scooted over? You know, because we want to add another character. We wrote this new song that now has to be in there and has this character that's not being featured in the cover. So scoot that over and let's put that in there. Well, that's going to add a week minimum because you've got to redo that character perfectly and move it over and fix that whole thing and not make it look like it's been fixed and repaired. It's not like computer art where you can kind of do that, you know. So but it's doable, but yeah, you can't say, you know, well, and we still need it by the same deadline. There's no way that won't happen. I've never had problems with receiving payment. I've heard from other people, excuse me a minute. I've heard from other artists, I won't say names, that have had trouble with get their down payment, and then they got to chase after the band. And my advice is work with the record company when you can. Say what label are we doing this, and find out what their budget is. Say what budget are you giving these guys? They want me to do the artwork and all that. Let's work together through you. If they say we're not doing that, it's up to the band. Then you go back to them and tell them what your position is. Be firm. You know, don't be a jerk. Be firm. Here's what it has to be. If you want this, I will and can deliver it, but you have to follow these guidelines, you know. And but that's not that bad. It's not. Some people say it's not like 50% of the time. No, there's the occasional hiccup and bump, and there's the occasional personality that clashes with me or with the artist or whatever. And I can get along with anybody, but there's been a few people. There was a band, I won't say their name, had me on the phone, and they're saying, okay, what we need is this robot going into a city, and it's destroying and crunching these people. We want it to be the goriest thing you've ever done and all that. And I'm writing all this down. He waited till the end to tell me that the robot only kills people of color. And it was a skinhead band that are prejudiced skinhead band.
Right.
Not that they all are. This one was. And I put my pencil down and I said, all right, I've heard everything you have to say. And I didn't interrupt him. I said, but now it's my turn. Oh, he knew where I was going within a few words, and just a stream of cussing me out. And I said, "Oh, thank you so much." I just hung up. You know, that was it, because you know there's that. You know, and like I said, I won't say who it was because they certainly failed. It's not a band that's around. You know, and I thought, how do you justify that attitude? You know, so there's that element. You know, or when I'll say, I've had to talk people out of some really bad ideas.
Yeah.
One of them was a crucified pot leaf that looks like a man crucified on a pentagram on fire. Yeah. And this one, 2 skeletons in the Garden of Eden, but every leaf is a razor blade. Think about, I said, really on a CD this big, every leaf is a razor blade. Yeah. You know, I said, you're going to have to zoom in to show that. You can't have the whole Garden of Eden as an expanse. Plus, it's the fold out for your vinyl, and you know a lot of guys still aren't on vinyl, you know, so that's not going to work. Another one was, okay, we got this idea. When they're telling you the idea, they're telling you this like it's Shakespeare, because we're going to have this misty cover, and it's 2 staircases that just go up and up and up, and then they look at you like this. You know, what do you think, man? And while they're telling you this, the bass player and the drummer's in the back token up, going, yeah, yeah. You know, and that's when you know you're dealing with kids. And I'm not being mean. I'm just trying to say, it's like you guys don't have a clear grasp of some of that. I said, you'll get laughed at for that kind of stuff. I said, people, that's corny, brothers. I'm trying to tell you that. And I've had to talk a few, more than a few, out of a few other ideas that, you know, and I'm not going to go into that because the people watching this are going to go, is he talking about me? And it's not like that. I mean, some other people will say, I got a better suggestion, and they've gone with it. It wasn't that their idea was stupid, but when they told me about it, it's like, oh, you know what I think, though? And I'll tell them, I said, I'll draw that up in about 15 minutes, send you a pic on your phone. And they're like going, oh, yeah, you're right. Okay, yeah, we're going that way. because they gave me the seed of the idea. That's, again, true collaboration. They gave me the idea. Then also, I've had a couple of ideas that they talked me out of, and I'm glad they did. On Worm Blue Nothing, the skull in the background was where the nose hole is, looks like the opening of a monk's cowl, you know, like this, where the face would be inside there, the hood.
Yeah.
And
we will be pulling that one up.
Yeah, and good. And I wanted to have a floating monk, like he's dead, or the spirit of a monk floating right up, and you can see through him, and that formed the opening of the nose. And Phantom Slaughter said, I love everything, but come up with a different idea for that. And so now what we're familiar with now is that tower that comes up, and it takes you a minute to realize you don't see the whole skull face. That's the tower instead of the nose and the teeth, and it's an illusion, like Salvador Dali would do. That kind of thing. Not that I'm comparing it to Dolly, but I mean, it's one of those that takes you a second to catch that. Oh, that's not a whole skull. That's two things juxtaposed together that make one image, which I'm interested in doing. You know, so in that case, he talked me out of an idea that might not have worked as well. And I still have the pencil sketch of that going, yeah, I'm really glad he talked me out of that. I know how I plan to paint it transparent and real ghostly and all that stuff. You should see the sketch he sent me. You know, so I knew what we were working on there, and I said, okay, we're going to have to, you know, I see, I get it all. We're going to have to really restructure this. And he goes, well, I don't want any changes. I said, oh, I didn't say changes. Let's rebuild it from every single concept you've got. And so when we did that, he fell in love with it right away. And of course, he tells me, he goes, that's what I'm hoping to get from you when we talk about these things. During Blue Nothing, we were on the phone every half an hour to an hour in the last 2 weeks of that painting. Just going, okay, what do you think now? Okay, this blue is too turquoise. Okay, hang on. All right, what do you think now? And I said, remember now, it looks wet, so it's looking a little, you know, shaky. And he goes, okay, because I will dry it with a hairdryer a lot of times to be able to show people or to transport the work if I have to, you know. And I would do that, just, you know, all that. And I go, okay, click, click, click. What do you think now? You know. And we were back and forth daily. Hourly almost. And I'd say, okay, hang on, I'll fix this. Okay, what do you think of these blues? I said, this has a gray base, this has a brown base, so it's not just all the same blue. And he was going, okay, I like that, more of the brown base. You know, and originally he says, I'm going to want the gray base, until I showed him the other thing. And then he goes, okay, no, I like the brown better. And actually I did too. I didn't tell him that. I was like, okay, the brown base works better, and so on and so forth. But we'll talk more about that when we get to that one.
Yeah, that's really cool because you collaborated on 2 albums with him thus far, and then some T-shirt illustrations and stuff. Yeah,
and some merch, and that big fold-out poster that's in Foreverglade.
Yeah, I have that as a shirt, the one that has a lot of the colors on it, and then the skull face. He's got some hair, I think.
Oh yeah, big hole in the scalp right here.
Yep. Yeah, I have that shirt.
I don't even have that shirt, so I've got to grab one. I don't even have that one. The color version of it. And I was trying to talk him. I said, how about doing a print that's blacklight? Blacklight's popular again. And I said, but these colors, it suggests blacklight to me. I said, I think people would go crazy for it. You know, smoke their favorite herb or whatever, and then say, let's look at this blacklight. You know, I suggested to Ed Mundell that the cover of his album be blacklight reactive, and he did it on the cassette, but not on the other, you know, on the other release parts, because they were like, oh, I'm not sure.
Yeah, that would fit.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, really, with his music. Yeah, definitely. You know. But yeah, I don't, like I said, I don't have even a copy of that shirt that you're talking about. But that's I just recently sold the original drawing of that zombie, all that crosshatch zombie. I just recently sold that, and sold some of the inside illustrations that go inside Foreverglade. Some of the little black and white pieces, and the slipcase that holds the album in has that ghostly face. That's based on a rotted tree I found.
Okay.
What they call
I think I know what you're talking about.
Doom Lord. Yeah, it's in purple. You know, it's not red. The painting isn't. Painting's just in brown and gray and white. But we wanted it to be neutral, so you could do anything with it. You know.
Well, nice. You want to pull the pieces up?
I'm ready.
All right. There we go.
Tomb mold. I would have put money on it. Yeah. I just sold this original too. I just sold it to a man in North Carolina.
Oh, nice.
Huge tomb mold fan. I mean, he asked me, do you know when they're going to tour? I said, no, you have to get a hold of them. I'm not privy to their tour schedule. I don't know. I don't hang out with them. I wish, I'd love to, but they're in Toronto, Canada, or at least Canada. You know, maybe not Toronto, but they're
either that or Vancouver, right? I don't remember though.
They might be Vancouver, right? But they're in Canada. So are Sedimentum. They're French Canadian. You know, that's why their album is in French, and a lot of people didn't catch that at first because they're hearing the vocals. It's the whole thing. The lyrics are written in French.
Nice. Yeah, I knew the title was.
So it's an easy translation, isn't it? All right. Well, this one, Dave that runs 20 Bucks Pen, he contacted me having seen some Argus work. I think it was Argus work. And he said, I got this band, and I'd heard the vibe about them was already pretty strong. And I said, ooh, Tumult, yeah. And he said, they're going to need an interior. And what the idea is, he goes, here, it's a planet, but we don't see the planet. It's an interior shot, caverns and stuff, epic in scope. And he says, and I want to show, no, not a single human being. It's a whole concept of alien insect-like creatures, but not cliches, not a praying mantis guy and a spider guy and not that kind of thing. Insectoid creatures. And we're seeing a glimpse of their society inside as much as you can. So one of the titles on the album is The Abyss Walker, if you're familiar with the album.
Yeah.
That's the first character, that middle character there that has the opening for the heads right there, the multi-legs. That's the Abyss Walker. And if you notice down around the bottom of it, you'll see what look like carvings in the ground. Are you seeing that? Okay. What he is doing is walking back like a crab walks sideways. He walks backwards, and he's the lawgiver. He's the smart one, and he's carving information in their language onto the ground as it walks backwards. His real brain is that stuff at the bottom. The head up at the top are just the eyes. But the actual thinking mechanism is that ganglia that's down at the bottom. And I explained this to the band, and they were like, whoo-hoo! Yeah, because they said that the effect that they want, once I first began talking with Derek Vella, one of the guitarists, he said, he showed me a Clark Ashton Smith paperback novel, and he said something like this cover art, and it was pretty good. And he says, but less fantasy and more weird, like unsettling horror. And I said, yeah, you came to the right guy. So I turned into that. They originally wanted it all purple. Now, this is an idea that I'm not going to say wouldn't have worked, but I said, I see this as a lot of mucus colors on a washed out brown. I said, but that doesn't sound good when I say it. Let me show you a swatch, an example. When I showed them that, they said, oh yeah, go with it. Oh yeah, go with it. They weren't.
There's some like purple tones in there too, which has a nice contrast.
In the back part. But yeah, and all these characters are from the impressions I got from the lyrics and how the record sounded. I got to hear a little bit of the rough before it was mastered and all that stuff. Very little, very tiny little bit, but it was enough to go, oh, I get this, because I like the Finnish death metal, and these guys are compared to the Finnish style a little bit, Finland style, and there's that thick doomy. I like doomy death metal. I do like fast, but I don't like it's just so fast and technical that it's not, it's just, I like the chugging, graveyard crawling doom aspect, I like that. And these guys are just hit you over the head with it. They're just loaded with it. And that worked really well. There's a song on it called Chamber of a Sacred Uthaka, and that's the big green wormy looking thing that you see there. This entire area is the Chamber of Sacred Uthaka. And what we see is it's carrying an egg sac. If you look closely, it's small hatchlings are starting to emerge inside that egg sac. And when you go over to the far left-hand side of the painting, you'll see that there's an empty egg sac, and the little green ones of that little green babies of that species have already exited, and it's bringing a new egg sac to hang there. That's what's happening. Now, the cave itself is based on two things: what we know a cavern looks like, and an infected ear canal together.
Huh.
Yeah, and I won't point it out, but there's actually a representation of an ear in that picture, and most people don't find it. And then when I show it to them, they can't unsee it. I'm not going to point it out. I like people to look for it because only one or two people gone, I think I see it. It's not big. It's little, but it's in there. There's an ear in there because I thought I can't resist. I've got to put this in here. There was going to be a web in the upper right hand corner, and they said no. And I wanted that crabby looking thing to descend out of this web, and I was going to make up not a spider web, a totally different biological, totally different web that would be in an alien style movie or something. And they said the logo has to go there. The logo is going to be really horizontal and big, so don't put that in there. And now I'm glad that I didn't. And that was, see, again, an idea they talked me out of, and I'm glad because it would have gotten covered with a logo. And now when I look at that painting, it doesn't need anything in the upper right hand corner at all. It doesn't need anything. All that text there works just fine. You don't need any other information to let you know about these monstrous characters. It tells itself. There was a DJ, gosh, I don't remember what state it was because someone sent me this email. He said this DJ was playing the Tomb Mold album, and he goes, "Boy, is this an indescribable cover?" And this is over the radio, so you don't see it. He goes, "You can smell this thing dripping off the album." And I said, "Oh, I take that as a thumbs up. You know, that's a standing ovation." Yeah. And then, like I said, just recently sold the original of that, which was nearly 30 inches long. It's a big one of the bigger paintings. Nice. They're not all anywhere near that size, but that one, it just had to be to get all that texture in there that I had. And I wanted that alien writing to just look like cuts and scratches, and you don't know what it is. I didn't want it to really look like writing because these guys have, the alien plant and insect mind. And when I designed the characters, I combined bone photographs that I looked at with plant photographs. I didn't look at insects one bit because I wanted to get something that looks apart from all that and yet still being an insectoid. We know what an insect looks like enough that you can draw it out.
So it's more intuitive.
For inspiration, though, it was bones and plants.
Fascinating. Yeah, this cover turned a lot of heads.
I have to admit it did. I got a lot of mail about it. A lot. I mean, a lot. And it's still happening. People are saying, "Oh, I just got this." Holy cow! How did you? The second Tomb Mold album, the cover's by Jesse Jacoby, and he and I know each other on Facebook, and I think he's outstanding. I just think he is one of the, and he's working in game design right now, and so he's not doing a lot of death. And a lot of people said, "Well, he just vanished from death metal." No, he's hired somewhere else. That's what happens in the career. We talked about that earlier. That's what happens in the career of an artist. You go where the gig is. His gig right now is in game design, but he's painting. It's painted stuff, by hand. I think he's dynamite. I'd love to do a show with him.
Yeah, I need to see if there's any more work that's out there in the public currently, besides just that album cover, Planetary Clairvoyance, I believe.
Yeah.
All right. So then this is truncation of the Zodiac, right?
For the band 60 Watt Shaman, yeah. And that was printed as a big poster, which if I turn this computer around is on the wall right over there. Big. And the three women that you see in the foreground are the same person in different stages of their growth, not so much physically as the growth of their spirituality. A lot of times when I do a nude figure, depending on the story behind the painting or the theme of it, it means that's the soul, because the soul's not going to wear any clothes. And so how are you going to show that? Well, you can show them as transparent, which we talked about a few minutes ago, or you can show them as a nude character that way. And it shows her on the left still entangled with all the vines and things from a garden. And if you notice, that's happening. And she passes a sumptuous dinner. If you look in the background, there's a steak with wine and all that stuff. There's a man above there who is all the influences, because he looks like a wizard. He's got a book open, and very phallically there's a snake coming out of his crotch along the book if you look, and he's got fire in his hand because this is the guy that brings the fire down from the mountains. This is the guy that impresses you in your life. These are the people that impress you. And then there's the butterfly spreading its wings. In other words, it's time to break out of the childhood and enter life. So that's what she's doing on the left hand side. When you get to the middle, it's the same girl but a little bit older. Look at her clothes. They're all the same clothes. She's pulling the hood over her head, or starting to, because she's already decided. They've already told her, "You're a baby making machine. You need to be married by this certain age. You have to have a certain number of kids by this age." All the stuff that just damages women and societies worldwide. And if you look back there, there's a figure of a woman with no head, with stitch work all over there, because it's like, oh, you're just trying to make the perfect body or the perfect image of a wife or a perfect image of mother or whatever, and there's no personality in it. That's why there's no face or head on it. So when you get to the picture of her towards the middle, she's pulling that hood over because she's given up. Look directly above her, and you'll see the universe, see the stars and the planets on it coming in, and it's bug infested. You look at it, there's insects all writhing all through that. And there's actually Korean lettering in that you got to squint to see, that says our world is but an atom in the fabric of time and space, all written in Korean. Then it comes down to the naked body, and that's her soul. She's dead. And how you know that is she's sitting on a dinosaur skull that is not obvious at first glance. It's a triceratops skull. And it takes a while to notice that. It looks like landscape. And I did that on purpose. And that was for the stoner doom band a 60-watt shaman, and they wanted something psychedelic. They said, but not flowers and rainbows. I said, oh yeah, I like dark psychedelia. You know, the mental or image of the soul or something that shocks you out of your core. You know, but at the same time, doesn't have to be ugly. There's no gore or anything in that one. That one is a huge painting. The original is huge. It took me 3 months to paint it, but it was well worth it. I consider it one. It's the original's long gone, sold, but I consider that actually one of the best ones I've done overall. I really think that's one of my. If you notice the lighting on her skin as she's laying there nude, it's the same colors as all of her clothes, so that you know it's the same person. There's a unification, again, to use that term. There's a unification of this character shown to you in this sense that the colors maintain, and the face too. And that face is my girlfriend Sandy. Now the body is completely made up, but the face is my girlfriend Sandy.
Nice.
And in fact, if you met her, you'd see her face in a whole lot of my stuff.
Yeah, you got to use what you got near you for like reference pictures and stuff.
She's the muse. She inspires me.
That's awesome. So it sounds like all the paintings that we've talked about so far, they've been commissions. You haven't just created them and then the band, licenses them. Is that pretty much always how you work?
Well, funny thing you said that. This painting I had finished, completed, and showed it to 60 Watch. This one is one of the examples of one that I painted for myself. And I told them in a longer, more drawn-out version than I just explained to you what it all means. And when we got done with it, they were like, yeah, this one. Because they said they wanted something like the Cathedral album covers, by Dave Patchett.
Oh, yeah.
They said, oh, you're kind of like Dave Patchett. Well, I don't think my style is anything like Dave Patchett. What they meant was it's a collage looking, like there's all kinds of elements to see. So I understood what they meant by that. And they said, this is what we're looking for. They said, but we also don't want it to be too profound. We want it to be similar to the artwork you see on the side of a 70s van. So if that was all combined to get that vibe. And I said, and then I showed him this painting. I said, well, we were looking at some other things. I said, well, then let me show you this one. I said, this one I think might be too pretty for you guys because it is, more attractive looking than, like, say, the tomb mold picture.
Right.
And they looked at it, they didn't take, and then I explained it like I did to you. And then right then and there, they said, yeah, this is it. Yeah, let's get the paperwork rolling. This one's it. And this was at a club in St. Louis where I met them. They were opening up for Spirit Caravan, one of Wino's bands,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you did a poster for that tour.
Yeah.
Very cool. So then Divine Empire, Doomed to Inherit.
Mm-hmm. That's one of my favorites, and that's a watercolor. That's not acrylic. And that's surprising. Really? Yeah, a lot of people, I see them just like that surprise right there. They're going, how could it be? But it is. And my favorite part of it is look at the top of the painting. You think you see a skull face, but in closer examination, it's hands making the impression of a skull. Again, kind of a Salvador Dali nod. The hands like this look like the teeth, and then they're going up here to make the eyes. If you take a look at it, you think you see a skull, and there's no skull there. However, the painting is so full of skulls, your first thought is, oh, it's just another skull up there. And it's got those multiple arms. It was going to have several more arms, if you can believe that. And they said, how many can you get in there? Make it like the branches of a tree, just twisted and out there holding blades and stuff. And I did it, and the pencil sketch looked good. But when I started to color it in to show them a color version, boy, that wasn't going to work. It's like, this is working against itself. Let's drop the number of arms. And at first they balked. I said, let me show you. When I showed them that, they go, oh, yeah, you can't even tell there's any missing. And there's a lot missing. But I said, I took them out, but I gathered them in a way that, there's no empty or wasted space. And so, but like I said, that's one of the rare watercolors that I did, because the way they were describing it, they said, we want to find a tomb that's beyond centuries old. No one's seen it, and sunlight hasn't touched it. And they broke it open and shined a light right in there, and that's what they saw for the first time in untold eons. I said, I got it, and I said, I think I'll approach this. I got the idea in mind for a watercolor approach. And they said, well, how's that going to look? And so I showed them a sample, and they liked it. Boom, I just went ahead and did it. That was for Mercury Records. That was a good paycheck. Mercury Records used to have Sammy Davis Jr. and people like that on there. So they have a good financial backing, So I was able to negotiate a pretty good deal for that one. That's one of my favorites. The album was a medium, moderate success. It's not a big success. However, in later years, a lot of people have said, yeah, I've been picking, because it was reissued by some company. I don't know what company it was. And then a lot of people got a hold of me and said, "Whoa, when you did this, that far back?" I said, "Well, it's not that far back, but yeah."
It's like 2000. I
So,
listened to it this last week.
yeah, 2000 or 2001. I think you're right. I wouldn't. I'm glad you said that. I wouldn't have recalled what it was. They all do start to run together after a while, especially if you're working on 2 or 3 at once.
So it's like hard for me to believe this is a watercolor. That's what I typically work with. So to get like these really muted colors, like how did you go about that then? Like a lot of like grays and stuff?
When I outlined it with markers that bleed when they're wet. And then I used straight up watercolor on that, but very limited, as you can tell, extremely limited palette. There's some bluish gray with a lot of blue stirred into it, light blue, and white stirred into it, but no pure white, not at all. Remember, I mentioned that, no pure white. And then I used that as the blender for every single part that was in it. So the same light seems to be falling on it all around. It was going to be a lot more shadowy on one side. I said, no, that's doing it a disservice because it's one of those compositions that goes down the middle. So it's got to be, it's got to be an even amount of lighting, And the girl character in there is a character from their first album, which was done by a tattooist. He did. I think the first cover is airbrushed, and I forgot his name. He's really good. Their first album cover that has that character is really well done. But they said they couldn't work with him for whatever reason. Maybe I shouldn't be saying that, and I don't know. I don't remember the reason. But they said, yeah, we're looking somewhere else, and we thought of you. And so I met them again in St. Louis. I either meet bands in Chicago or St. Louis because I'm right in the dead center of the United States in the southern armpit. Midwest, and so that's where you're going to go. St. Louis, right by the Mississippi River, there's a whole bunch of clubs and places, or all the way up to Chicago, and that's where I meet almost all the bands, and when they're on tour, when they come through there. And I'll just say, can we make an appointment, so I can show you this stuff in person? That's always goes a lot better, if it's possible. I get to see a lot of free shows.
Nice.
Just saw Gatecreeper, and they just put us on the list.
Hell yeah.
Very, very nice of them. I greatly appreciate it. I don't take that for granted.
All right. So then we were talking about Blue Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So now I see some of the points you made. What else do you have about this one?
Well, I made up the flying maggot that's to the right of the skull head. I made that up. He was originally one of the T-shirts he commissioned through another artist that has a big sleeping dragon. And he goes, I want to do
Riddick,
I think it is Riddick.
It's an old Riddick.
Yeah, there's that, and then Gut Slaughter, the girl from Bali, does one of them too. But I don't remember. I sometimes might say the wrong name for the wrong. But he commissions a lot of art from a lot of people, and he wanted a dragon in there. And I said, I'm thinking that we can have a flying creature. It won't be a bat. I said, and a dragon might be a little too on the nose, like a little too much like we've seen that before. I said, so I've got an idea of a bat-winged maggot. And he said, all right, show me. I showed him. He goes, yeah. Oh, yeah. And he didn't argue at all. He goes, yeah. He liked it. So the name of that painting is Bat-Winged Maggot. That's the title of the painting. It says that on the back of the board. Nice. Bat-Winged Maggot, published as a cover of Worm Blue Nothing, $20 pen, blah, blah, blah. That's all on there. It's on the paperwork. That's the name of it, is Bat-Winged Maggot. I try to give them all names, and some of them I got some pretty crazy names for some of them, but I can justify why, But he and I were both looking online at a bunch of the older, really, really technical Dungeons and Dragons work, and because he's real into that. He's real into Ravenloft and the original manuals, monster, deity, and demigod manuals and all that stuff. He is, and so we were talking back and forth about who our favorites were. My favorite artist is Errol Otis and Keith Parkinson. Those two names. Parkinson himself is superhuman. He is so good at painting. He is so good, it just drops my freaking jaw. And he's dead, unfortunately, now, but his son runs his page and sells prints and all that stuff. But I said, okay, I'm much more thinking of this in a Parkinson vibe, but not imitating him. So we looked at some of his work. He goes, yeah, I like the idea of a big fence. If you notice, there is kind of a fence in it. And it has a candle burning on it, which originally, where the candle burning on it was a disembodied penis. And I couldn't get away with it. They said, okay, that doesn't quite go with the picture. I said, well, I just want to sneak it in there. And I said, all right, I'll turn it into a melting candle. And we did. And actually, I again, see, they talk me into that, and I like the burning candle, a melted candle better. I really do. But there's all kinds of little hidden things in there. There's some perspective tricks in there too, where there's more than one staircase, and one staircase that's further back is bigger than the one that's forward, which is impossible because I want to show that dimensions are crossing over on each other without drawing a line or being obvious. I want people to look at it and go, what's happening here? Here's another hidden thing. Look at the lightning and look at the Gloom Lord character down there on the lower left. It's holding the candelabra. If you, it takes a minute to see this, they are the same shape. Do you see it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It takes a minute because what happens when lightning strikes and your eyes are wide open? You see an after image. You know you do. For a minute, it's like, whoa, and you blink, and there it is in dark, and then it's in light, you know. So the lightning struck, and I thought, I got to get an after image in here, and how am I going to do that? And it hit me as like a ton of, as I was drawing on a cheap piece of paper, how am I going to shape the lightning? How am I going to do that? It just hit me. It's like, oh, wait a minute, that looks just like the cowl. Oh, that's the idea. The whole hooded cowl is the same shape of the lightning because maybe the Gloom Lord is somehow supernaturally able to create the light. Maybe he's sending the lightning down because there he is with an unlit candelabra. You know, there's no, and yet there's a glow by. If you look at the candelabra, there's a glow behind it. Your eyes go down to it, and there's none of the candles are lit. That's another little mystery. However, he's got lightning in the sky happening, and it may not be on Earth because there are two heavenly bodies, two planets in the sky there. So people say, what is it, two moons or two what? I said it's another reality. It's another reality impinging on whatever reality this one is. That's why the dead are the ghosts of the dead are walking down there. There's that one graveyard. And you notice too, if you look at the very lower right bottom, there's a retinue of bats. Instead of being up in the air like bats always will be, cliche wise, they're flying along the ground. You never see that. But if you look, they're down there. So there's a lot to be, and I always strive for this, a lot to be uncovered in not only things to see, but to things to think about. I really like to engage the audience's mind because they're all going to be indulging in their favorite substances and looking at that album cover over and over and over again. And there'd better be some quality stuff in that. There'd better be some content. You know, there has to be something in there. Just like you watch a movie and go, boy, I never caught that one scene. I never realized what that meant until the third time I went, that kind of thing. And I thought, oh, I've even from a young age, I thought I've got to be able to do that in my pictures. I've got to be able to do the same thing. I would say that I'm maybe basically a frustrated filmmaker.
Yeah, I always love that about your work is like things meld into one another. You don't know where one thing starts, one thing ends, and it plays tricks on your mind. And this one definitely showcases that.
That happens in reality. Sometimes you'll be hiking with your friends and you look right at one of your friends and not see them. And then they suddenly move and go, oh, wow, you were standing right in front of, 10 feet away from me and I didn't see you in there. Whether they're dressed in camo or not doesn't matter. It'll happen like that. And I told somebody once, because they said this surrealistic style doesn't make sense. I said, oh, it makes more sense than anything. I said, if you walk down the street, just keep your eyes focused, straight forward instead of looking around. You'll see half a stop sign, a window that might be open, but you don't know if someone's in it or not. You only see this much of the sky. There's water down here, but if you keep moving, then you stepped over the puddle and the water's not there anymore, so on and so on. Make a list of all the things that you saw just walking down one sidewalk. If you put all those things in a list, a lot of it doesn't quite go together. Put that in a painting, and then you're approaching what surreality is. You know, because it's the subconscious mind making sense of the conscious world. It's internalization becoming externalized is the best way to put it without alienating somebody listening, because I'm not trying to sound pious with this, but all art is the external or internal world being brought out to the external world, because art is all these impulses come to the artist. The artist is the lens that the light focuses through, and it goes through your central nervous system like a blender, and what comes out the other end is the artwork. And that's why everybody has different artwork. You know, that's why it's like, wow, 3 people can paint a little red barn, and none of them will be the same for certain reasons. Some will have great texture. Some will be a bright red. Some will be a dull red. Some will look like it's falling down. Some painted it as if it was new. But there's a lot more going on than that. You know, what made you make those choices? Why did the artist decide to make theirs different than the other 2 people? Blah blah blah. You know, and so surrealism really opens up just take a can opener, just opens up the head about how we perceive the world we live in. You know, I mean, and it may sound cliche, it is a little bit cliche, but the idea that we all perceive it so differently. And I think that our dreaming life is just as real as our waking life, is just not in physical terms. If you dream of falling off a cliff, you didn't really fall off a cliff, but you experienced it, didn't you? You know what it's kind of like. So therefore, you could put that into a film, a poem, a painting, and make somebody else feel it too. And that's one of the biggest goals. It's not necessarily what the image is, it's how does the whole thing feel? How did it feel to me? And am I making my viewer feel the same thing? And that's difficult, very difficult. I'm constantly striving to do better. I think I'll strive for the rest of my life to do better at doing what I think is going to work to make the audience, the viewer, feel what I was feeling, at least in some part of it.
Oh, that's amazing. All right, so this one has quite a story to it.
Yeah, it does. I hope everybody knows who the white-haired gentleman is. That's H.R. Giger, who, when Salvador Dali died, he was named the #1 surrealist artist living in the world. And he's the guy that is known for creating the Alien movies and the whole landscape and the creature, and also Poltergeist and some other movies too. But he's known for Alien. He had this photograph is 2006. He advertised to the people that manage my work in Europe, called the Society for Art of Imagination, AOI. And I still work with them. And they said, Brad, and we're sending this out to hundreds of people. Are you interested in doing this? H.R. Giger's looking for 100 artists. And he'd like somebody from every single continent, island, if possible, to take part in a surrealism show. It has to be not horror, but it has to be surrealist. And I said, oh yeah, I'm interested. So I sent in eight pieces to begin with. And systematically, one at a time, they're not being accepted. And I thought, ooh. So I sent in another one thinking, this one will do it. And it was like, boy, you came close. Have you got anything else? And the last one was this one. Now, believe it or not, this one's a watercolor also. And I hardly ever do a watercolor. Yeah. And I hardly ever do a watercolor. That one's a watercolor. And I thought, okay, he might like this one because it's got that washed out palette that he uses.
Mm-hmm.
He said, and when I met him, like at that day where that picture, he said, of all the things that I saw by you, this one stood out. He goes, this one is the one that I really liked. He goes, I looked at it. I was like really amazed that he would say that, in the way that he spoke to. He would talk to you like he's yelling at you. I don't mean loud. He felt like you were being admonished, but that's just him. Because I said, I was asking him a question, and he goes, no, I am asking you, and I said, well, what do you mean by what I meant was this and this? He goes, that's what I mean, but there's a smile on his face. He was crotchety, but not really to me. He was just somebody was taking his picture, and he goes, I would rather you not do that. A little bit later, the guy says, well, can I have you pose for one now? He goes, no, I told you I'd rather not do that. But 5 minutes later, he posed for pictures with somebody else. So and when I got there was only one other American artist there from Cincinnati. Do you remember Cincinnati? I think Cincinnati's correct. And it was a woman. It's terrible of me, but I forgot her name. I'm sorry. And it was close to half a day before I found someone else who spoke correct, who was American and spoke complete English. Everybody else had broken English. They did very well, but there were times they didn't know what word to say, and I would say 2 or 3 words until they would point and say, yes, that's right, But I didn't have trouble communicating. Sometimes a little slower, but I've never been treated so well in my life as when I got to Europe and took part in this show. I really was unaware of how well known my work was in Europe. In fact, at that point, was far more well known there than I am here in the States. I didn't know this at all. I was unaware of this. And they were like, Brad Moore, you do this and you've done that. And I'm just, my jaws on the floor. It's like, oh, really? I didn't think, wow, you guys know all that. Wow.
That's awesome.
Oh, and they got to pat me on the back, and we went into a restaurant, and they didn't charge us. And then we got into a train, and they gave us 2 bottles of wine and started to pay for it. They're going, no. So I was talking with this guy. We had just gotten there, and dead tired too, because the clock around the clock, when it's time for us to sleep, it's daylight, time to go and do this. So 24 hours without sleep almost on the first day. But we were so energized, it worked, But the guy was having trouble. He's speaking to me in German. I said, no sprechen Sie Deutsch. No, I can't. And he says, he's trying to get it to me. And I said, as best as I could think of it in my head, I said, the German word for art is Kunst. I said, I Like Kunst mit Herr Giger. When I said that, not only did he set up, but all the other people, all these heads turned around. You know, they're all drinking and eating bread and all. They go, Giger. And then somebody who could speak pretty well said, the big show that's going on at his castle, because he owns a cat, or he did when he's alive, owned a castle in Switzerland on a walled 500-year-old city. And so we took the train up there, and the train doesn't go straight up the mountain. It goes around the mountain like this till you get up to the top, you know. So when I first saw that, I thought, how in the hell does the train go up to that? This rickety train we were on, it was all ka-chunk, 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 you know. It was old. You know, everything over there was old, but well-maintained. You know, here, if there was a 500-year-old chair, it would be in a museum. Over there, they reupholster it, and you sit in a 500-year-old chair because they use them. And the wood just feels like it's clay. It's just been so worn with hands and things. And you go everywhere with that. Franz Liszt's piano was in there from the 14th or 15th century, whatever century he was in. And his piano was there. It said, do not touch, but I touched it. There was also a mummy's hand in there that you weren't supposed to take pictures of. I didn't know that. We clicked through a few pictures, took 2 steps, and there's the sign says, no, do not take pictures of the mummified hand. I thought, ooh, nobody said a word. Nothing happened. No, I don't think anybody saw it, which I'm glad because I didn't want to break rules or get in trouble, you know.
Yeah.
But that was one of the wildest weeks that I've ever lived. That one is untouchable. What you don't see in that photo, not the art, but the photo of he and I, is to the left is an older white-haired woman. Her name is Bridget Marlin. She's extremely appreciated in Europe, and she paints all the portraits of the Dalai Lama for postage stamps and such.
Huh.
And that's her day job, you know, which is awesome enough. And she's got stars around his head and all these things. Bridget, not Bridget, Bridget with a D, Marlin. And she's still alive and all that stuff. And she was astonishing to meet. Oh, goodness sakes. Her knowledge was blowing me away. She spoke very good English. So it was, as the day went on, more people came and spoke English. That got a little easier. First got there, I was a little worried. We were all given wine. So in my hand is a wine cup. I'm not a big drinker, so after about the third one, it was hitting me. I was like, huh, you know, like, oh, Herr Giger, oh, you know. Anyway, the painting is called "The Dwellers in the Horoscope," not horror, horoscope, and the character to the right, his arms like this. It looks like death. Well, sleep is like a miniature form of death. That's the god Morpheus, which is the god of dreams. So he's about to fall asleep. His hands are in this position, but not quite completed it yet. And sleep is like death. If you notice, there's a coffin shape behind him. The tentacles coming out of the blackness, that's the sleep, wrapping you in and pulling you in until you go unconscious. That's what that signifies. The girl laying prone at the bottom is the dreamer of this whole picture. She's laying down with an arm like this, like she's asleep. Her eyes are wide open because when you're asleep, your inner eye is wide open. And so all the things in there are things that actually happened in real dreams that I was writing down in my dream diary. Specifically, the Asian princess to the left. If you notice, her feet are in a plate of food. It takes a little bit to look at it. And I had a dream of an Asian princess with robes that were really old, like, wow, those are 100 and 200 years old, like dusty, bad curtains, but she was all wrapped up in fur, you know, but the fur is falling out and it's just skin left. And she had her feet in a plate of food, just kind of wiggling her toes. And in the dream, it did not seem unnatural. It was like, oh, they do that here. And there were dozens in the dream, dozens of little bats nibbling. Well, in the picture, little bats didn't work at all. It was comical. So I drew one big bat licking right at her toes. And has a great macabre effect, and it works better. So see, again, there's an editing process. That wasn't in the dream, but it certainly is in the painting because, you know, it works thematically and everything. It works. And like I said, again, the whole thing is a watercolor. There was a Greek metal magazine that wanted it for a cover. And as soon as we worked out the deal, they went out of business. Since then, it remains unpublished. Other than I do sell prints of it, you know, at art shows, but it's not published as an album cover or anything since then. Which strikes me as odd because most people have said, of all your works, I'm thinking that's your masterpiece. I don't agree, but I've had many people say that's your masterpiece because they like it a lot. Then I was going to say, then why hasn't a band or a magazine or something, you know, commissioned it? That's one that remains unpublished.
Interesting.
And it was at his castle for about 3 months, I think, when the show ended. I didn't fly back to get it.
Where's the original now, then?
In my kitchen. In my kitchen, yeah. They crated it up and sent it back. The Society for Art of Imagination paid for everything.
That's amazing. Great story.
Yeah.
And then this is the last one I have here. So this is a poster.
Yeah. Caravan of Skulls. It's not what am I trying to say? It's hand done and everything, not the traditional like t-shirt, whatever I'm trying to say with the
like a screen press.
It's not a screen print. Yeah, it's not, because a lot of people said, "Oh, it's a screen print," because I guess it looks like one. Now it's just done comic book style. It's just an ink drawing colored in with the same kind of colors you would do for a comic book cover or what. It's the same thing. And it was Spirit Caravan, one of Wino's bands, with Dave Sherman on bass, and Dave Sherman just died about half a year ago, so that's kind of touching. And then Victor Griffin, he's the lead guitarist of Pentagram with Bobby Liebling. He also has a side project called Place of Skulls, and these two, and they're both, Victor and Wino are buddies. So they talked about having a tour together for forever, and it wouldn't work out logistically, and suddenly it did. And I said, then I want to do your tour poster and your t-shirts. That was never made into a shirt, but it was the tour poster, along with several other tour posters. You never just have one. You want to have several to sell at the merch booth. So there's mine. And what it is you see that there's a headless guy reading from like a tablet, but he's headless. He's got the hand up there like he's this brilliant guy pontificating. His head is strapped to the top of the wagon behind him with a candle on top of it. And the candle is blown out, so that indicates he has no more thoughts. Wino suggested he wanted the spaceships flying in there. I didn't necessarily want them, but when I drew it in, I thought, oh, that looks okay, because he's into UFO side. He's into all that stuff. And so a couple of the details, like the griffin, it's being pulled by a griffin. But I came up with that toothy skull thing that's like the harness. I came up with all that. It only took me about 3 days to do the whole thing. It's about 18 inches, something like 17 or 18 inches. And then that's the size I printed the posters too. Although later there were some 8.5 by 11 prints too. I got a few of them, but I've already sold them all. So I've still got the black and white version of it, because you don't, in this kind of thing, you don't color the original. You make a print on cardstock and color that, and that way you can have different versions of the colors. This was before people were using computers to just change everything. So I still have the inked black and white version somewhere packed away. That was early 2000. That's old. Early 2000s. That's close to right at 20 years old. Right at about 20 years old. So that's one of the oldest of all the stuff we've looked at. That's one of the oldest ones.
Yeah, I wanted to pull this up just because it felt a lot like your comic book work, and I wanted to at least show a little bit of that.
That's how they wanted it to look. They said, make it look like an underground comic book like you used to do. And I said, oh, yeah, I still do that. We can do it. Yeah. I'm always saying the phrase, you came to the right guy. I say that all the time. Yeah, I do. I said, yep, you came to the right guy.
Oh. Well, nice. Is there anything you feel like I missed that you want to touch on?
Well, no, I feel like you did a very thorough job, and I thank you for letting me, kind of spew some of my opinions on things. When you did ask me, and when you first sent the questions to me, what advice do I have to young people? But or young artists, I feel like I've peppered that throughout the whole thing, But you need to think about the fact that if you want to be an artist in this stuff, number one, you're going to have to work hard and all that. And you're going to have to do the one thing, and I'm going to say this right now to all people who are contemplating doing death metal or comic book or whatever, this kind of artwork for a living. To get good at it, my advice is this. You're going to have to do the one thing you're completely avoiding, is you're going to have to practice and work at it. And I see so many people with a half-done sketch and go, well, I'm just going for the basics here. And then you see 4 or 5 of them, they're just the basics. I go, when do we see a finished piece? Well, I think each person, the viewer, communicates the finished piece in their own mind. I said, that nice thought, but it doesn't work that way. You're not going to get hired for that. You might find one here and there. They'll go, I like that idea, but does that communicate that idea? And communication is the big part of it. And so I try to tell people, it's a lot of work, and a lot of you guys are really good at avoiding all the work. I look at a lot of people's sketchbooks. I look at a lot of people's stuff. Sometimes people's parents come up to me and say, he's afraid to approach you, but will you look at his portfolio? And I'll say, tell him to get over here. I said, you got to, there is no fear in this dojo, and so come on over and let's look at it. I used to I am a prankster, and I do have a sense of humor that is off-putting to some people, because there were times here's a portfolio, and I said, well, let's take a look at it. And I go, ooh. I go, I'm just kidding. And I said, my professor told me if you don't like that kind of, if that jolted you, you won't like working for, so get a tough skin. And I would do that jokingly, not crushingly. And then I would look at them and tell them what was good and bad. There's going to be both. Tell them what they need to work on. A lot of times they will disagree. When I was a student, I also disagreed, but it ended up being everything they told me was true. And I should have realized that, because these guys were big in their fields and had sold paintings for $20,000. Yeah, they knew what they were talking about, didn't they? So here's one thing I'll leave you with. Almost all art is abstract, and yet the work that I do is, you would never call it abstract. None of the death metal artists are really abstract and everything. But I'm gonna leave you, which will also leave the viewers, with this thought. Okay, now we're going to try this together. Now, this will not make you look like a fool. There's no wrong answer. But I don't want you to hesitate. When I've done this with other people, they hesitate and go, that ruins it. Okay. This is how abstraction works. I'm going to say one word. And in less than one heartbeat, I want you to tell me the color that comes to your mind instantly. Ready?
Okay.
Tuesday.
Blue.
Wait, you took too long. Okay, let's try another one. Here comes another word. You have to give me the instant color that comes to your mind. Ready? Right. Thursday.
Red.
Okay, excellent. Because usually people say purple. Now, what does this prove? If you took 5 foot wide canvas, oil paint, and painted it with various tones of purple and called it Thursday number 1, that's communicating how inside, that's how you internalize what Thursday looks or feels like. Again, you're trying to make people understand what it feels like is more important than what it looks like at first. That's why details come last. And I try to give this lesson to people all the time. And think about a math test or math question that has positive and negative numbers. If you think about the positive and negative numbers as battling each other until you get to the conclusion or the answer, that's an abstract way of looking at it, isn't it? When my back itches and I have my girlfriend going, okay, a little to the left, a little to the right, you're almost getting it. Oh my God, there you got it. I have this picture of this little character that has like a helmet and goggles, that he's in this little device, and he's trying to avoid her fingers, stopping the itch. And I told her, I said, I'm going to make a t-shirt one day, this little character, and he's going to be called the Itch, and that's entirely abstract. But yet when I draw it, that'll be a representation of a cartoon 3D kind of character. And I'm trying to get people to understand, forget what computer programs you're using and how much money you spend on your iPad and all that. I just hear this, tech talk. And I said, none of that has anything to do with the images you're making. I hate to tell you this. The image has to come from here and here. And how do you get that out? How do you externalize the internalized thing? And one of the things is, think about it abstractly first. If you can train yourself to do that, I've just given the surface level. Train yourself to do that and realize and just let your mind show you what happens. As soon as you do, that idea, that image, that's your idea. That's how to break free from imitating your favorites and not being original. There's a lot of people not original, a lot of stuff, and we're all derivative in some ways. There was always something that turned us on that they go, that's what I'm going to do. And so then you do your version of it, and that's fine. It's handed down and all that stuff. But I don't want to get pontificating. We'll leave it there.
Well, Brad, quite a learning adventure and just an excellent conversation. I'm so grateful to have you on here. And for anybody watching, of course, you've got to, support his work, find him on Instagram. And I'm just in awe. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you ever so much.
All right. Thank you, everybody. New episode coming out soon.